You're living here for a measly sum. My husband's words made my mouth twitch in annoyance. That's right. You don't do any housework, sleep for 5 hours, and you're just squatting in Denise's house. You're like the black sheep of the family. Why don't you just leave? Black sheep, huh? Who's the real black sheep here? A subtle smile escaped my tightened lips at my mother-in-law's words. I just didn't care anymore. Is that so? Well, if you insist, I'll take my leave. That was the last time I saw my mother-in-law and husband. My name is Carlin Mavey. I'm 32 and work for a notable company in Boston. It's a pretty big firm. Work there earnestly for a decade, and you'll find yourself in a respectable position with a decent income. 2 years ago, I married Dennis, who works for a similar-sized company. We lived in a newly built house. To everyone around us, it must have seemed like smooth sailing. I met Dennis, who's a year older than me, through a friend's introduction. My first impression was that he seemed sincere. He often talked about his mother, and I liked that he valued family. We didn't have a fiery romantic start, but we kind of started dating and then kind of got married. Even after marriage, we had no children because we both needed to continue working. We lived in a house too big for just the two of us, enjoying a comfortable newlywed life. Because we were both working, we often missed each other, but we made sure to value the time we spent together, and we had no financial problems. I thought we were doing well, until now. Unlike me, who had lived alone since starting college, Dennis lived with his parents until just before our marriage. Born and raised in Boston, both his college and current workplace were not far from his family home. I only knew his late father through photos. Dennis was still in high school when his father passed away. He probably didn't want to leave his mother alone. I met my mother-in-law for the first time at a dinner arranged for both families to meet. Dennis had told me his mother was about the same age as my own, but she looked much younger, a truly beautiful woman. Nice to meet you, Carlin. My son speaks so highly of you. Please take good care of him. My mother-in-law smiled warmly as she spoke. I couldn't sense any of the hardship she must have endured after losing her husband. Nice to meet you too, mother-in-law. I'm looking forward to becoming family, I replied, feeling relieved. I thought that this person and I might actually build a good family relationship together. Our home seemed to promise a fulfilling future, always filled with laughter and warmth. Both my parents and my mother-in-law were fully supportive of our marriage, and the preparations moved along surprisingly smoothly. We set the date for the wedding, and our house under construction was nearly complete. Before embarking on our married life, we made some decisions. We agreed we'd both work for a while, so we needed to pre-plan chores, taking care of mother-in-law, and financial matters. Firstly, chores would be handled by whoever was available at the time. Regarding my mother-in-law, she was still healthy and had my father-in-law's inheritance, so she wouldn't struggle financially. We decided it would be best if we lived separately. Up to this point, all was good. But then came the issue of money. I thought splitting all expenses, including the mortgage, would be fair. Dennis had different ideas. He proposed that I handle the mortgage payments while he took care of other living expenses. This gave me pause. I had heard of couples splitting everything or pooling resources, but Dennis's suggestion was unusual. The monthly mortgage alone was $2,700. I had thought from the beginning that this was too heavy a burden. The 3-story house was too big, even if we were to have children, and the large property, mostly chosen by Dennis, seemed daunting to manage. Looking back, I realized I had already made several wrong choices, but I wasn't thinking clearly at the time. I didn't want any financial disagreements before marriage, so I convinced myself to agree with Dennis's proposal. In addition to the mortgage, there were other costs like groceries, utility bills, and taxes. I had no idea how much I would regret that decision later on. Every month, we put all our payments into a joint account in Dennis's name. This included the mortgage, living expenses, travel costs, and future savings. The monthly withdrawals were hefty, but we were both high earners to begin with. Given our busy work schedules and limited time off, the joint account should have been continually growing. Why isn't there as much money as I expected? I stumbled upon it by chance. I casually opened our savings book to see how much we had saved up, wondering if we had some major expenses. I couldn't recall anything significant. That left the possibility that Dennis might have spent on something, but he didn't mention anything during our last family meeting. We both had busy work schedules. I left before Dennis woke up, and he came home after I'd gone to bed, so we often didn't get to talk much even though we lived together. To break through this disconnect, we started having regular family meetings. We discussed big financial decisions like how to spend our savings and future travel plans. We just had a family meeting a few days ago. Seeing our savings dwindle without hearing anything about it at the meeting was odd. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, I thought, scanning through the latest transactions. I realized Dennis hadn't transferred his share of the living expenses for this month. I glanced at the calendar. It had been 3 days since payday. We were supposed to contribute our share by then. Maybe he just forgot. Dennis was coming home late today, so I decided to ask him gently tomorrow and then forgot all about it. 3 months later, I remembered. Come to think of it, I never actually checked. Did he make the transfer like he was supposed to? With that thought, I opened the drawer in our living room TV stand and pulled out the bank book for our joint account, which was under Dennis's name. I flipped through the pages and my eyes widened. What's going on here? The balance had decreased even more since last time. A growing sense of distrust filled me. I could hear my own heartbeat ringing in my ears. A sinking feeling crossed my mind, and with trembling fingers, I flipped the pages back. My worst fears were confirmed. You've got to be kidding me, I muttered. Household expenses hadn't been transferred for 3 months. Dennis didn't come home until late that night, and we missed each other the next morning. I couldn't confront him due to our conflicting schedules and my growing unease. Finally, I caught him on the weekend and declared that we were having an emergency family meeting. Dennis reluctantly sat on a living room sofa and looked at me, his face serious as if he knew I had discovered the truth. You know what this is about, don't you? As much as I wanted to explode in anger, I started the conversation as calmly as possible. Dennis nodded quietly. Why haven't the household expenses been paid for the last 3 months? The truth is, what Dennis told me was beyond anything I could have imagined. To cut to the chase, Dennis had quit his job without telling me. This all started 4 months ago. My coworker got promoted before me. Can you believe it? A guy less competent than me. The boss is clueless. The company is a mess. What's the point of staying at a place that can't even evaluate people properly? I was stunned. I couldn't find the words to respond. Sure, it's frustrating to be surpassed by a coworker. I get that, but we have a family and we just built our house. Shouldn't you secure another job before quitting? Isn't that just common sense? I thought he was a man of integrity. That's why I married him. I didn't recognize this man who spoke so rashly. So what's the plan? You were going to find another job, right? Of course, I want to show them. I'm planning to get a job at an even bigger company, so cover our living expenses till then. Dennis replied, unfazed, as if he didn't grasp the gravity of the situation. He didn't even apologize. Not that I needed an apology, but the sense of betrayal was overwhelming. Everyone has times when they're unhappy at work and want to quit. I don't love my job every single day either. What hurt most was that he didn't even consult me first. So I agreed to cover the expenses, but only for a short time. Dennis seemed to be actively job hunting while I was at work. Initially, I thought it would be fine. There were job magazines on our living room table, and I figured he'd find something soon. But months passed, and I began to realize I had been too optimistic. A year went by, and Dennis still hadn't found a job. You've been supporting me for a year now. Can't you just keep doing it? You're the one with the stable income anyway, he said. I was already struggling with the mortgage, and the cost of living was piling up, making me work harder than ever before. I willingly took on overtime and even worked weekends. I barely had time to breathe, let alone handle chores. I was sleep-deprived and disoriented. I almost fainted on the train to work today. Dennis's offhand comment didn't sound like a joke to me, and even if it were, I couldn't take it that way. What was the point of our marriage? Of me working so hard? I began to lose sight of everything. I'm going out, I mumbled, knowing Dennis probably wouldn't hear me, and headed for the door. Today was another work day. I had to make money no matter what. Dragging my feet to work, I survived the day on willpower alone. I finally headed home more exhausted than when the day started. It was already past 10 p.m. and dark outside. I'm home, I called out as I pushed the door open. I noticed something unfamiliar in the entranceway. A pile of cardboard boxes. What's this? I wondered. They were too old and sloppily packed to be delivery boxes. Just then, the living room door opened, and Dennis appeared, his face covered in stubble. Oh, they're for my mom. She was having a hard time living alone, so we decided she should move in with us. What? I didn't hear anything about this, I said, my anger surging. Living together? What on earth was he talking about? Ever since he quit his job without telling me, I had no idea what he was thinking. I used to worry about his mother living alone, and I'd even thought we could have a good family relationship. But I didn't know then that my seemingly cheerful and pleasant mother-in-law would turn out to be a real piece of work. The same could be said for my husband, too. What are you talking about? She's my mother. Helping her is a given. Are you stupid or something? Dennis's tone was dismissive. At this point, my opinion didn't matter anymore. I had enough of understanding this throughout my married life. A few days later, my mother-in-law showed up with a big grin. She hugged Dennis at the front door and gave me a sarcastic smile. "Oh, Carlin, you're here. I heard you're always busy with work, so I assumed you wouldn't be around," she said. Her words, "You probably don't do much housework, do you?" cracked my already fragile heart even more. My malevolent mother-in-law and my unemployed husband Dennis had finally pushed me to my breaking point. I couldn't see any hope for the future. Life with my mother-in-law was harder than I had ever imagined. When I'd get home late from work, she'd snark, "What are you doing not taking care of the house? You're failing as a wife." Dennis, far from defending me, would add insult to injury. "I'm letting you live in my house, so at least do the housework." How easy it would have been to say, "You're not working, so why don't you do it?" But no, that would only lead to more insults and emotional wounds. I didn't even have the energy to argue back anymore. My mother-in-law would just loaf around the house all day, never doing any housework, as if it were the norm. Dennis had become so entitled to being taken care of that the job listing magazines had disappeared from our living room. The only thing I could do while dealing with these two burdens was to work relentlessly. I needed money to live, but more than that, being engrossed in my job allowed me to forget the harsh reality. People around me probably found it strange to see me more focused on work than I was before getting married, despite not being married for very long. Occasionally, I felt concerned glances my way, but I was grateful they didn't say anything. If someone showed me kindness now, I was afraid I wouldn't be able to go on. Long days of working late, catching the last train home, squeezing in just 5 hours of sleep, and then heading back to the office as soon as dawn broke had become my routine. At this point, weekdays and weekends didn't even matter. But I did plan on taking a half day off sometime this weekend. The fact that I had to use that precious half day for a family meeting to tell those two that we couldn't continue living like this, especially when my savings kept dwindling, almost broke me. I knew my mother-in-law was constantly ordering food delivery, but recently even Dennis had been joining in. They'd been indulging in steak and caviar during the day. What's worse, they'd even been taking trips together. For now, they were just day trips, but it could escalate to international travel. I used to put extra money into our joint account, but after realizing how much they were spending, I now only transferred just enough to cover the monthly withdrawals. In other words, if they kept up the spending, payments would start falling behind, leading to a worst-case scenario. So here we are, the three of us gathered in the living room over the weekend. The two of them, now shadows of their former friendly and genuine selves, are glaring at the papers I've spread out on the coffee table. "What's the meaning of this, Carlin? What are you trying to say with all this paperwork?" My mother-in-law squints up at me. "It's a breakdown of our income and expenses. We can't continue living like this. I told you I'll pay it back when I get a job. Just hold on a bit. And the mortgage is just a measly $2,700. I'm letting you live in my house, so don't make a fuss over such a measly sum." "My house? You're letting me live here?" Measly sum, words I can't ignore make my lips twitch. "That's right, you're the black sheep here, sleeping 5 hours a day, not doing any housework, and living in Dennis's house. Why don't you just leave?" Black sheep? Who's the real black sheep here? A laugh escapes my tightened lips at my mother-in-law's words. Everything suddenly becomes inconsequential, or maybe, just maybe, I finally realized that there was never any need to try so hard. All right, no more bending over backward, not for these people. I felt like a weight had lifted from my body and soul. "Is that so? Well then, I'll take you up on that and leave." My voice echoed in the once quiet living room. I must be smiling more than I ever have before. "Ha! What?" Both of them looked stunned, their eyes glued to the coffee table. What I smoothly pulled off and placed on top of the papers was a bundle of divorce papers. Of course, they were already filled out and stamped by me. "Here, you sign it too. It'll make your mom feel more secure, won't it?" Mumbling, Dennis picked up the pen from the table. He hesitated for a moment but was encouraged by his gleeful mother to sign. I'll be moving out within this month. Don't worry, I'll submit these papers to the court immediately after the move. Fine. Goodbye. Black sheep, whatever they called me, my heart was unshaken. 2 weeks later, the day had finally come. The weather was perfect, with a pleasant breeze blowing. It was the perfect day to start a new life. I need this and that move too, yes, everything as I instructed, I told the movers as I bustled around what had become someone else's home. After all, I had to move everything that was purchased with my money or had a receipt in my name. Hey, you're taking the coffee table, the sofa, and even the TV. You're stripping the living room bare, you sneaky cat thief. They were both following me around, shouting. To be honest, they were just in the way. If you say this house under your name is yours, then all of this stuff paid for by me is mine, right? I finished my last set of instructions, let out a sigh, and turned around. The two of them fell silent at my words, looking at me bewildered. I glanced at them and turned on my heel. Well then, goodbye. That was the last time I saw both of them. I completed the move without any issues and immediately submitted the divorce papers. They were promptly accepted, and I was free. Not having to share mortgage payments or contribute to a joint account was a relief, and I was surprised at how much money I had left over. I never realized I was earning this much. Over the past year, paydays have been depressing. I was genuinely shocked when I realized my monthly payments. Later, I found out what happened to my ex-husband Dennis and my former mother-in-law after I left them. Because they lost me as the breadwinner, they started falling behind on all their bills. Demand letters started piling up at their home. Dennis, ever so proud, ignored all of it. He didn't consult with the bank or the IRS. Eventually, they were faced with demands for a lump sum payment. Unable to pay, Dennis borrowed money from a loan shark to cover it. But that wasn't the end of their problems. Realizing he couldn't avoid repaying loan sharks, Dennis finally swallowed his pride and started doing manual labor at a low-paying job. Had it not been for his period of unemployment, he could have found a more decent job, but that's none of my business now. As for my mother-in-law, her pension wasn't enough to live on, so she started working a part-time job. She's now a cashier and has a reputation as a lady who can do her job right. Not surprising for someone who was ungrateful, never worked, and just ordered food delivery all the time. But again, that's none of my business. As for me, I'm enjoying my single life. My skin has improved, and even I can tell that my expression has softened. People tell me I smile more now, and that I've become more attractive. I hardly do any overtime work and can fully relax on weekends. I even have time to enjoy my hobbies. My life is just like it was before marriage, but because my married life was so miserable, everything now feels incredibly wonderful. I've also been getting along well with a popular guy at work. He had been interested in me for a while but hesitated to approach me because I was married. Anyway, life is smooth sailing this time around, that's for sure. I am feeling great today.
How could you? I screamed, my voice echoing through the empty lot where our family home once stood. All that remained was a pile of rubble. I spotted Trent casually leaning against his BMW, sipping his daily Starbucks as he scrolled on his phone without a care in the world. He slowly looked up. "Oh, hey, babe. Welcome back," he said flatly. "While you were off finding yourself at that retreat, I took care of a little house project for us." My hands trembled and tears stung my eyes. I had just returned from a wellness retreat in the mountains, hoping to regain my strength after losing Mom. Now I came home to this violation. "A little project? Trent, this was our home," I shouted. "You demolished our 25-year life without even telling me?" He shoved his phone in his suit pocket and strode towards me, his imposing figure casting a shadow my way. I stood firm. "Eliza, that old place was getting run down anyway, and we could really use your inheritance money to build ourselves a nice new modern home." His voice turned from nonchalant to a growl. I flashed back to our wedding day when I saw that sparkle in his eyes. Now all I saw was cold, hard greed. "My inheritance? Is that what this is about?" I asked in disbelief. "You destroyed our family home, my memories with Mom, just to get your hands on my money?" "Our money, or at least it should be." Trent fired back, his temper rising. "I'm fed up with you keeping everything separate. The inheritance, your savings. We're married. After everything I've given you, the luxury cars, the country club membership, our children's college funds, you owe me." I stood speechless, rage and heartbreak swirling inside me. This was the man I once loved with my full heart. Lucas and Sophie's father. Now he was a stranger consumed by avarice. Trent, you supported this family because it's your responsibility, not some favor you did me. I was the one working long hours in the classroom while you wined and dined your CEO friends. My voice grew louder, bolstered by a lifetime's worth of suppressed resentment. Well, one of us had to bring money into this family, though it seems teaching second graders doesn't pay like it used to, he scoffed. That tore it. I swung my hand swiftly, slapping him hard across the face. The sound cracked through the empty space where warm family memories once echoed. For a moment his face registered shock, then his lips curled into a menacing smile. You'll regret that, Eliza, he growled, stomping back towards his flashy car. That inheritance is mine. You can make this easy or difficult, but either way, I'll get what I deserve. I stood alone among the ruins of my life, my mother gone, my home demolished, my husband transformed into a monster. I had dedicated years to my family, putting their needs before my own. Now Trent threatened to steal my last ounce of security, convinced he was owed a cut simply for being my spouse. I sank down atop a pile of gravel that once supported our living room. This man thought he could scare me into submission, believing I'd back down as I always had. The old Eliza may have acquiesced, terrified of conflict and desperate to keep the peace. But losing Mom showed me how fragile life was. I refused to surrender myself any longer. Gripping a chunk of drywall that displayed Lucas's childhood height measurements, I made a vow. Trent underestimated my strength if he expected me to hand everything over. I would fight with my last breath to protect myself and my children. With tears drying and resolve hardening, I marched forward, the demolition debris crunched under my feet, remnants of the past, fuel for my future. I was battered but not broken. Now focused by righteous fury, I pulled out my phone to call the one person I knew would help. Hello, Claire? It's Eliza. I hope you still have room on your caseload because I need the best divorce lawyer in town. Sitting across from Claire over lukewarm coffees, I delved back into memories I had long suppressed. Eliza, walk me through your relationship history with Trent, Claire said gently, her voice belying her reputation as a bulldog in the courtroom. I closed my eyes, transported back over 2 decades prior. It was 1998, and at 23 years old, I was focused on kickstarting my teaching career. Trent was an up-and-coming sales executive I met through family friends. Confident and charismatic, he swept me off my feet quickly. We married within a year, and by 30, I had left my job to focus on raising our children full-time. It was always my dream to be a mom. Trent was thrilled too. He wanted me home, tending to the kids, while he traveled for work. I strived to be the perfect wife and mother. My parents helped tremendously while Trent was away. We were a close, loving family, up until 6 months ago when we lost my father unexpectedly. My mother's health, then, took a sharp decline, following Dad's passing. I'm so sorry, Eliza. Claire offered gently. That must have been an incredibly painful time for you. How did Trent respond? I sighed, anger rising as I replayed his apathetic behavior in my mind. Honestly, Trent grew increasingly impatient and cold. He hated that I was preoccupied caring for my grieving mother. He began making callous comments about me, playing nurse too much. Claire frowned, jotting notes on her legal pad. And he provided no emotional support during this period? None whatsoever. If anything, he often compounded my grief with his cruel reactions. My mind drifted back to one piercing incident. Mom and I were reviewing some old photo albums together, laughing and crying as we relived nostalgic memories. Trent came home unexpectedly early from a work trip. Is this what my house has turned into? A pity party patch? He had grumbled. Trent, I scolded, have some compassion. Mom just lost her husband of 40 years. And I just want my wife back. This melancholy scene needs to end. He stormed off to pour himself a scotch. Mom's fragile smile had vanished instantly, replaced by resigned sadness. We didn't look at the albums again. I shook my head, drawn back to the present moment across from Claire. So there you have it. The man I once loved disappeared, consumed entirely by selfishness. And now? My voice quivered as I recounted the image seared into my mind of our demolished home, of Trent's unconscionable betrayal. Claire leaned forward, her expression shifting to righteous anger. Don't worry, Eliza. We're going to make him pay. Over the next weeks under Claire's counsel, I dug up documents, financial records, and Trent's vicious text messages. She was confident this evidence would land a favorable judgment. We sat across her wide oak desk reviewing our plan when Claire's phone lit up. She glanced at the screen and her eyebrows shot up. Well, speak of the devil. It's a text from Trent. He says he wants to meet to discuss things civilly. He must have gotten wind that you lawyered up. Claire let out an icy laugh. My stomach churned, imagining his scheme. There's no way I'm agreeing to some fake meeting just for him to intimidate me more. I know, Claire agreed. She stared pensively at her phone screen as a sly smile crept across her face. The wheels were clearly spinning behind her intelligent eyes. Actually, Eliza, I have an idea. She leaned forward, resolve emanating from her. What if we use this text to set a little trap for your scheming husband? I nodded cautiously as she detailed a plan to meet Trent under the guise of good faith negotiations. But with Claire secretly recording the conversation, we could obtain hard proof of Trent's coercion and threats. My anxiety melted into tentative relief at the finally holding him accountable. As we wrapped up final preparations for the clandestine meeting, I turned to Claire, new confidence rising within me. Let's do this. It's time for that snake to get exactly what he deserves. Claire smiled knowingly and put a steadying hand on my shoulder. Showtime! My hands trembled as I stared down at the text from Trent, confirming our clandestine meeting spot, a discreet cafe downtown far from prying eyes. Though Claire and I had devised an airtight plan to expose his deceit, doubt still gnawed at my core. What verbal assaults awaited me? How far would Trent go to pressure me into relinquishing control of my inheritance? I steeled my nerves, refusing to let past anxiety dictate my actions now. With my family's legacy and financial future at stake, failure was not an option. I arrived early at the nondescript cafe and selected a quiet corner booth, my back to the wall for full visual coverage. I set my phone on the table, discreetly pressing record before concealing it behind a napkin. The bait was laid for Trent's inevitable tirade. Now confident our trap was set, I waited. Right on cue, 15 minutes late as always, Trent sauntered in, a smug look plastered across his handsome yet hardened face. I gestured politely to the seat across from me. Showtime. Well, Eliza, isn't this mature of us to handle things civilly? Trent offered with mock sincerity. I nearly gagged at his attempt to take the high road after demolishing our family home without notice. Instead, I offered a flat smile. Yes, I think it's important we have an open and honest conversation about all this. Trent shifted, clearly unsettled by my nonplussed reaction. He was likely expecting a much more volatile response he could redirect with manipulation as he had done so many times before. Good. Let him squirm a bit. I broke the silence after an awkward beat. I'll cut right to the chase, Trent. Are you willing to negotiate fairly on separation terms? I kept my tone cool yet firm. At this, Trent sneered. The polite facade instantly melted away. Separation? He spat the word. You must be joking. I hope you're not expecting me to agree to anything that compromises my financial future. Compromises his future? Typical Trent. Money and status were all that mattered to him. Certainly not family. I pressed on calmly. I'm talking about splitting things equitably between us. Surely we can be reasonable adults. Trent pounded his fist on the table, rattling the coffee mugs and startling patrons at other tables. No, Eliza, I will not agree to walk away empty-handed. Not after wasting the prime of my career on this lackluster marriage, he jabbed bitterly. You will sign over your inheritance, or I'll make you regret ever threatening this divorce. And there it was, no pretense anymore about preserving our family or saving our marriage. Trent laid bare his singular goal, getting his greedy hands on what he felt he deserved. Behind his macho threats, though, I detected desperation. His future fortune and reputation were at stake if he couldn't manipulate me into conceding. This time he underestimated my resolve. I kept my tone measured. Are you quite finished with your tirade? Because nothing you say will coerce me into just handing everything over. I'm fully prepared for a legal battle. Trent's face reddened, his temper rising. But I recognized the flash of fear behind his harsh glare. My stoic confidence had caught him off guard. You entitled, washed-up loser, he sputtered. I made you everything you have, and this is the thanks I get? You'll regret this, Eliza. No one steals my future. With that, Trent shoved his chair back forcefully, grabbed his jacket, and stormed out, steaming. My hands were trembling again, though this time with relief and triumph. I grabbed my phone, hands shaking, to stop the recording. Not only did I hold firm in my refusal to cave to his threats, I now had them all on tape. No more hiding behind a charming veneer. The world would soon hear Trent's true venomous nature. For the first time in months, I broke into a grin. My tormentor's downfall was imminent. With Claire masterfully pulling legal strings and karma beginning to strike back at Trent for his deceit, I had set the stage for his reckoning. I almost pitied the poor guy if he wasn't such a loathsome snake, willing to crush his own family for personal gain. Oh well, no mercy for the selfish fool. After settling my bill, I strode confidently out the door towards a future that shined brighter by the minute. My resolve was steeled for the fight ahead. Trent would bitterly regret the day he crossed me. I sighed, seeing the caller ID flash Trent for the third time that morning. After ignoring his barrage of petty texts, he was apparently resorting to voice messages to vent his frustration. My finger hovered over the decline button when a thought struck me. Trent's behavior had become increasingly erratic and abusive. Building a record of evidence couldn't hurt for the looming legal battle. I answered coolly, "What do you need, Trent?" His voice came through the speaker shrill and commanding. "We need to discuss funeral arrangements for your mother. I already contacted my preferred venue and caterer and put a deposit down. I figured you'd be too emotional to handle planning." My breath caught in my throat. The audacity after months of dismissing my grief, now assuming control and decision-making because I was too hysterical? I managed a terse response. "Actually, Trent, I've already made arrangements with Mom's church and her closest friends are helping coordinate everything. But I'm sure your caterer refunds deposits if you ask nicely." I couldn't help the subtle jab, indicating his presumptuous planning was not required or appreciated. An exasperated sigh followed by a lengthy pause echoed from the phone. When Trent spoke again, any veil of compassion had vanished, revealing biting contempt. "You always were helpless when it came to executive decisions. I don't know why I'm surprised you'd leave the planning to a bunch of old church biddies barely clinging to life themselves." I clenched my phone tightly, holding back a spew of enraged curses. "Breathe, Eliza." His cruelty, shocking as it may sound on tape, could be critical evidence if he tried claiming I was the bitter, unreasonable one later. I responded evenly. "I'm organizing this funeral in alignment with Mom's wishes, something you never bothered to learn in 25 years together. She will be honored respectfully. Please just let me handle this, Trent." Another tense pause followed. For a moment I thought he may have hung up. Then came a chilling, clipped reply. "Fine, Eliza. Throw your quaint little funeral tea party. But don't expect me to stand around making small talk with those religious fanatics. And not a penny extra from my accounts." The line clicked dead. I released a shuddering breath and collapsed onto our bed, which Trent had strategically left stripped of all bedding. Even in death, he continued finding new psychological torture methods. Over the next days, his cruelty only crescendoed. As I sorted through Mom's belongings with supportive friends, he ridiculed the task as feeble sentimentality. When our son Lucas came to help with cleaning, Trent's calm facade broke. "Don't you have exams to be focusing on instead of wasting time on redundant housework?" he had berated our stunned son. All this could have simply been hauled off to Goodwill instead of drama queen Eliza's tedious emotional purge. Lucas retreated from the house quickly after that, clearly pained by his father's escalating bitterness. My heart broke envisioning the distance growing between Trent and the children. He was willing to sever even these bonds in his rabid pursuit of assets and pride. The day of Mom's funeral arrived, gray and weary, mimicking my turbulent mindset. As I dressed in a simple black gown, Trent emerged shirtless, sipping his morning beer. His appearance mirrored the disregard he had shown Mom even while alive. "Give my well wishes to the brainwashed Bible Brigade," he offered snidely. Hot tears stung behind my eyes. I slipped silently out the door into the drizzling rain. The showers disguised streaming tears as I drove to the church. Surrounded by true loved ones there, the service was filled with tender moments, honoring Mom's generous soul. Trent's absence went largely unnoticed. While it pained me he had abandoned us at this sacred time, Trent's recurring callous treatment solidified my will. Any lingering hesitation to push forward on severing ties vanished. His efforts to intimidate me into obedience had only affirmed suspicions of abuse for years. Now, with clear-cut proof, I was determined to fight back legally. As we laid Mom's rose-adorned casket to rest beside Dad, the rain subsided, leaving glimmering puddles in the cemetery grass. The clouds parted, revealing hints of hopeful blue skies beyond life's storms. Gazing into the light, I knew Mom and Dad were cheering me on proudly, and Trent's reckoning awaited on the horizon. Sitting across from Claire, reviewing the latest legal documents, I finally felt empowered and in control. Though Trent continued his petty power moves, I now had the law on my side. With the testimony and evidence you've provided, we've compiled an ironclad case, Claire assured me, gathering up papers into a leather folio. Her fiery confidence fueled my own. I'm certain the judge will rule in your favor regarding financial separation, and with documented proof of emotional abuse, you'll easily be granted full custody of your children. A wave of relief washed over me at this prospect. Securing Lucas and Sophie's well-being through the volatile divorce was my priority. Trent's influence had become downright toxic. Protecting them legally would provide peace of mind. You've worked wonders, Claire, I offered sincerely. I honestly don't know if I could have come out on top in this fight without you navigating the complex legal channels. Claire smiled humbly, handing me copies of the documents. I'm happy to play my part, but truly, Eliza, your courage and refusal to be intimidated is what's winning the day here. Don't forget that inner strength. Her words resonated with my core. For so long I had minimized my resilience, believing Trent was the trailblazer. Now clarity revealed I was the foundation holding everything together behind the scenes, and I deserved equitable compensation for my sacrifices. Buoyed by this insight, I practically floated out the law office doors, ready to embrace the next phase with renewed moxie. My steps halted abruptly when I spotted Trent leaning smugly against my Subaru's driver's side door, preventing my entry. Here we go again. Well, isn't this cozy? He offered sarcastically, gesturing to the law office. Nothing like conspiring with shady lawyers instead of trying to salvage our sacred marriage vows. I scoffed at this warped perspective. I hardly think a healthy marriage involves one partner selfishly demanding assets and demolishing property without consent. Now please move. You're blocking my car. Trent stepped defiantly in front of the handle as I reached to open it. His height had always given him an intimidation advantage. I refused to cower this time. Not until you agree to a mediation session with a counselor, Trent demanded. I'm sure once you explain yours fairly to an expert, they will set you straight about what you are entitled or not to. I nearly gagged at this attempt to silence me by making my protests seem irrational and uninformed. I glared directly at him with emboldened confidence. I know precisely what I'm entitled to, Trent, and I have an extensive, well-documented legal team securing it without manipulation. You will not cheat me out of my due compensation. His smug veneer flickered briefly with doubt. My audacity clearly hit a nerve. Regaining composure, Trent pressed closer, his stale coffee breath assaulting my senses. Careful, Eliza. You seem to have forgotten who ensured you lived so well all this time. Threaten my reputation and I'll reduce you to dirt. Though his words raised the hairs on my arms, I didn't flinch. We stood face to face in taut silence, twins titans at the peak of a perilous precipice. I broke the tension calmly. Feel free to sling threats if it makes you feel powerful, Trent, but we both know you stand to lose far more than I do here. With strength belying my trembling core, I peered unwavering into his dark eyes. Now for the last time, get away from my vehicle. You no longer dictate my life. A charged beat passed where anything could have transpired. To my relief, Trent scowled bitterly, then stepped aside, grumbling. I maintained vigilant composure despite quaking inside, safely driving off without glancing back. Maintaining courage through intimidation tactics was not easy, but I realized the breadth of my fortitude, and nothing was stronger than a determined woman protecting her interests against a greedy bully. Game on, Trent. Your reckoning awaits. I tapped my foot impatiently, glancing between my watch and the imposing courthouse doors. Claire and I had filed the paperwork, petitioning for financial separation over a month ago, and the court date had finally arrived. Yet despite the early hour, Trent was characteristically late, no doubt a feeble attempt to regain control by making me wait anxiously. Little did he know, I had reached a state of zen. The law was on my side. 15 tedious minutes later, Trent came swaggering up the marble steps, not a hair out of place in his arrogantly confident power suit. I offered a cordial smile. "Nice of you make an appearance, Trent. Shall we proceed?" He bristled at my unruffled demeanor, but nodded curtly. I led the way into the expansive courtroom as we took our respective places at the defendants' tables. Claire entered soon after, flanked by our other legal aides, nodding reassurance. I kept my breath steady, visualizing victory as the bailiff called court into session. This was it, Judgment Day, for Trent's deceit. The proceedings commenced efficiently, with Claire masterfully presenting our evidence of emotional abuse and financial coercion. The judge listened solemnly, eyes widening at particularly shocking voicemails from Trent maligning my character. I had to hand it to Claire. She had crafted an utterly unimpeachable case. After what seemed an eternity, the judge cleared her throat, peering sternly over spectacles. "In light of the comprehensive evidence provided, I hereby grant the petition for dissolution of shared finances. All assets and inheritance shall remain exclusive property of Eliza, the plaintiff." I nearly collapsed with relief and triumph. Glancing to my right, I noticed Trent turning a shade of crimson I hadn't witnessed since Sophie's terrible twos tantrums. Veins bulged from his neck as he sputtered incoherently, trying to interject. The gavel pounded authoritatively, silencing him. Sweet victory. Additionally, in consideration of documented mental abuse, I'm granting Eliza full legal and physical custody of both minor children, the judge continued firmly. At this, Trent slammed his fists furiously on the tabletop, sending pens flying wildly. "This is outrageous," he roared, spit flying. "That money is rightfully mine, and you can't take my kids, Eliza." Before the bailiff could react, Trent sent the defendant's table crashing onto its side with a violent shove. He fixed his crazed eyes on me, shouting accusations as security restrained him. Rather than engage, I simply gathered my belongings calmly as he was dragged out, kicking and screaming. "You've made a grave mistake," he hollered among straining security guards. "I'll take back what's mine, Eliza. This isn't over." His lasting threats echoed down the marbled hall as I strode out to meet Claire with a confident smile. "Congratulations, Eliza," Claire grinned as we stepped into sunshine beyond the imposing columns. "You are now a very wealthy, single woman." And Trent's hysterics surely didn't help his appeal to the judge. Well done maintaining composure. I let out a deep exhale, feeling years of anxiety and oppression lifting away. "Thank you sincerely. I couldn't have navigated this without your counsel. In more ways than one," I chuckled. We exchanged relieved embraces before Claire headed off to handle newly freed up caseload. Meanwhile, I slid into my Subaru's driver's seat, finally feeling its true owner. Trent's desperate threats didn't faze my cooler state of mind. His burst of outrage proved powerless against the justice system, securing my rights irrevocably. Any sway he once held over me was crushed under the mighty gavel of truth. I turned the ignition key, feeling renewed energy course through the previously strained vehicle. Trent had monopolized the driver's seat of my life for too long. But with his recklessly controlling hands finally off the wheel, I cruised eagerly onward down the open road toward independence. "Mom, that creme brulee was amazing!" Lucas grinned, leaning back contentedly after our celebratory dinner at the upscale French bistro. "We definitely have to come back here." I smiled at my son, who was home on a short break before summer internships ramped up. With Trent temporarily absent from family life, the cloud of tension had lifted. Sophie squeezed my hand affectionately from across the table. "I'm so proud of you for standing up to Dad, Mom. You deserved that win in court," she offered sincerely. I swelled with gratitude to have my children close again without fear of callous comments shattering tender moments. As we strolled outside the restaurant, Lucas suddenly gripped my arm, nodding towards the bar next door. There sat Trent, half slumped on a stool, staring numbly at CNN, blaring predictions for an upcoming economic recession. Even from a distance, his unkempt appearance revealed a broken man. I felt Sophie's hand tense on my shoulder. "Let's go, Mom," she urged gently. I paused, taking in the scene of my once formidable opponent, diminished to a drunken shell of spite. His legacy and reputation apparently lay in shambles, much like the remains of our demolished home. Investors and elite executives had shunned him after his court outburst made salacious headlines. Rumor was his assets had taken a significant hit in the latest stock market plunge as well. The community backlash only amplified his downfall. "Karma's a beast, eh, Trent?" Lucas muttered. Seeing his disheveled father still sparked sadness behind the resentment in Lucas's eyes. Sophie linked her arm through his comfortingly as they walked ahead to gather an Uber. I stood frozen, gazing upon the aftermath of Trent's greed and hubris. Claire was right. He had far more to lose than me by refusing to compromise. Now every manipulative scheme and sociopathic threat had come crashing down in a brutal reckoning. Hard times humbled even the proudest titans. Though my righteous anger towards Trent persisted, witnessing his self-destruction awakened traces of pity amongst the bitterness. Perhaps if he demonstrated true remorse and sought help for underlying issues driving his egocentric worldview. My sympathetic pondering was cut short when Trent glanced up blearily from his drink. His bloodshot eyes registered rage seeing me. He rose unsteadily and staggered over, wearing a twisted smirk. "Come to gloat, have you?" he slurred, whiskey breath assaulting my senses. "Little Miss Righteous Victor." Trent wobbled, but spite sharpened his words. I stood calmly, meeting his hollow glare. "No, Trent, just heading home after dinner with our kids, actually. I do hope you'll get the help you need." Before I could finish, Trent erupted in a spit-flying diatribe. "Save your sanctimonious talk. This is your fault, Eliza. Your petty comeuppance threats me destitute and despised." He swayed aggressively closer. "I lost everything because of your self-centered vengeance." Sensing the confrontation escalating, I stepped cautiously back, gesturing to the approaching bartender for assistance. Trent was clearly beyond logical exchange in his inebriated rage. His unhinged tirade continued, attracting shocked attention from passers-by. "Mark my words, Eliza. I will get even. Your little celebratory parade ends now." He lunged towards me as the bartender grabbed him. I retreated quickly to where Lucas and Sophie stood horrified. Police sirens wailed from down the street, responding to calls about the disturbance. "Let's go home," I urged, ushering my shaken children away from the nightmarish scene. Glancing back, I glimpsed Trent being shoved into a squad car, drunkenly raging about comeuppance as they sped away. The vengeance Trent had poisonously plotted was now his own ruin, woven by greed. And despite his threats, watching him fade, unhinged and unwell in flashing police lights, I pitied more than feared the broken, bitter man. A year had passed since that tumultuous night, witnessing Trent unravel completely. His drunken threats persisted for months between jail sentences and court-ordered rehab sessions. But word was he had finally accepted a lenient sentence at an upstate center specializing in anger issues and financial disorders. With Trent's toxicity no longer poisoning my home space, I began envisioning how to rebuild, starting with restoring the literal foundation he had callously crushed. On a refreshingly mild Saturday morning, I stood smiling with Lucas and Sophie on the vacant lot where our family home once stood sturdy for decades. Claire snapped photos capturing the hopeful moment as we broke ground to construct a new dwelling, not haunted by residual darkness. "I'm so proud of you, Mom," Sophie repeated, squeezing my shoulder. "This is a fresh start for all of us." I surveyed the space, buzzing with construction crews hauling lumber, while Lucas and I discussed potential layouts. Trent's devastating demolishment had crushed more than bricks and mortar. But rising resilient from the rubble, I would forge new sanctuaries for my children, devoid of oppressive shadows. Over the next year, tangible rebuilding progressed in tandem with inner healing. With each golden beam raised and brick mortared in place, I sensed our spirits mending as well. Soon the lingering wounds from Trent's destruction would be more scar tissue than open gash. On a crisp autumn afternoon, I gathered with loved ones to celebrate the finished product, a gorgeous contemporary farmhouse blending vintage charm with sleek upgrades. Sophie and Lucas had invited college friends. Supportive relatives filled the home with infectious laughter. As caterers circulated with champagne to commemorate the occasion, I paused to admire photos adorning the fireplace mantel. Images of my parents smiled down, filled with eternal light and love, despite their earthly absence. Gazing around at those present, additional missing faces stood out painfully. Trent's parents had shown their true colors, aligning firmly with their son, despite incriminating evidence against him. And Trent himself sat stewing in isolation, still too prideful to take accountability. Their self-imposed misery was punishment enough. Occasional pangs of sadness resurfaced, missing the man Trent used to be before ambition consumed him. But focusing forward allowed me to appreciate life's everyday joys again, instead of dwelling on toxic relationships. Later, after guests had dispersed with hearty congratulations and housewarming bouquets, Sophie joined me on the front porch, gazing up at constellations glittering optimistically. She broke the pensive silence. "Dad sent me a brief letter today from the rehab center. It sounds like intensive counseling is helping him finally reflect more on the consequences of his actions." Though skeptical about authentic transformation from brief therapy, I nodded. "That's promising. Real change takes time, though." I hugged Sophie in closer. "But the most crucial relationships to fortify are right here, with people committed to lifting us higher." Sophie smiled up brightly through tears glinting in the moonlight. In her strength and sensitivity, my greatest co-creation glowed. She would perpetuate cycles of compassion, not malice. Together we sat in meditative silence, connected to forces intricately crafting redemption from ruin. Though scars remained, Trent's corrosion had only illuminated my resilient spirit. His darkness merely fertilized future flowers determined to keep blooming. As I watched him roll his suitcase out the door, a part of me wanted to scream the truth about knowing his dirty secret. But I smiled instead, bidding farewell to my husband Derek as he left for his business trip with her. "You have everything? Laptop, chargers, documents?" I asked, trying to mask my inner turmoil with a warm tone. "Yes, dear, all set," Derek replied, his eyes avoiding mine. He hesitated for a moment, as if sensing my underlying tension, but then he leaned in and pecked my cheek. "Don't worry, it's just a standard year-end review meeting." I forced a smile. "Of course. Have a safe trip. I'll keep everything in order here." He nodded and walked to his car. I watched him drive away, my heart sinking with every mile he put between us. Once his car disappeared from view, I let the facade crumble. "You lying, cheating bastard!" I screamed, tears streaming down my face. How could he do this to me? After 7 years of marriage, 3 of which he'd been having an affair with my so-called friend Jenna. The humiliation stung, but I vowed that karma would come for them both. I'd discovered their betrayal 3 months ago, quite by accident. Derek had left his phone unattended, and a text from Jenna Baby popped up with intimate details of their next tryst. My hands had trembled as I read the messages, each word a dagger in my heart. In that moment, I knew our marriage was over, but I couldn't confront him then, not without a plan. So I'd kept up appearances, smiling through the pain as I gathered evidence of their affair. Now, with Derek gone for a week, the stage was set. The private investigator had done his job, providing me with irrefutable proof of their transgressions, and my family, my parents and brother Luke, had rallied around me, vowing to help me expose the truth and make them face the consequences. I wiped my tears and took a deep breath. Time to get to work. I grabbed a box and started packing up Derek's belongings, stripping away every trace of our life together. By the time he returned, our home would be unrecognizable, a fitting metaphor for the end of our marriage. With each item I packed away, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders. The past was behind me, and the future held possibilities for healing and growth. I would be free of Derek's deception, and he would reap what he had sown. The memories flooded back, each one a cruel reminder of how blissfully ignorant I'd been in the early days of our marriage. "I'm the luckiest man alive," Derek had said, holding me close on our honeymoon in Maui. "You're my soulmate, Marianne. I'll love you forever." What a fool I was to believe those hollow words. Even then, he'd probably been unfaithful, unable to resist the temptation of other women. The thought made me sick. When we returned from Hawaii, he'd been attentive and affectionate, and we started talking about having children. But looking back, I could see the cracks appearing, subtle at first, then gaping chasms of deception. "Working late again?" I'd asked one evening, months after our wedding. "Project deadlines are piling up," he'd lied with a casual shrug. I never suspected a thing. Not until that fateful day 3 months ago, when his phone had betrayed him. "Hey, handsome, can't wait to taste you again. You made me so wet last time." The explicit text from Jenna had brought my world crashing down. "You worthless scum," I'd screamed, throwing his phone across the room. Derek had rushed home to find me in hysterics, the truth finally exposed. "It's not what you think," he'd pleaded, trying to spin more lies. "Jenna and I are just friends. Save it, you lying bastard," I'd shrieked. "I know everything. The hotel rooms, the weekends away on business. It's all exposed." He fell to his knees, groveling and begging forgiveness. "I'm so sorry. Please, we can work through this." I'd laughed bitterly through my tears. "There's no coming back from this. Our marriage is over." And so the facade had crumbled. In the days that followed, I alternated between despondent grief and volcanic fury. But as the initial shock faded, a new determination took hold, a resolve to make them pay for their betrayal. That's when I'd hatched my plan and brought my family into the fold. To their credit, they'd rallied around me without question, becoming co-conspirators in my quest for justice. Now, here I was, dismantling the remnants of my old life while Derek was off gallivanting with that harlot. She'd pay too, I vowed silently. I'd make sure both their worlds were destroyed, just as they'd destroyed mine. With my newfound determination, I knew I needed concrete proof of Derek's affair. If I was going to make them face the consequences, there could be no room for doubt or denial. That's when I reached out to Mike Rawlings, a private investigator who had helped a friend gather evidence in her own divorce case. Within a day, Mike had agreed to take on my job. "I'll need access to financial records, phone logs, anything that can establish a pattern of behavior," he told me in a hushed voice when we met at a cafe downtown. I nodded, my jaw clenched. "Whatever it takes, I want them buried under the weight of their own sins." Mike raised an eyebrow at my intensity but didn't comment further. "It'll take some time to really build an airtight case, a month at least." "Fine," I said shortly. "Just get it done, no matter the cost." As Mike nodded and we parted ways, a sliver of doubt crept into my mind. What if he couldn't find anything definitive? What if Derek had been too careful and covered his tracks? A wave of nausea washed over me, the anxiety almost overwhelming. But then Luke's voice echoed in my mind. "Hang in there, sis. We've got your back." My little brother had always been fiercely protective of me. When I'd broken the news to my family, he'd been the first to pledge unwavering support. "That son of a bitch will pay for what he's done to you," he'd snarled, punching the palm of his hand. "We're with you, no matter what." So I forced the doubts aside and channeled my energy into maintaining an aura of normalcy at home. I laughed and smiled when Derek sent his obligatory daily text updates, as if everything was fine. "Hi, honey, how are you holding up?" he messaged one evening. "Miss you." "I'm doing great," I typed back, only a slight tremor in my hands betraying the lie. "Just keeping busy with the deep cleaning I've been putting off for ages. You enjoy your trip." And on it went, a hollow pantomime of our shattered life together. But behind the scenes, Mike was hard at work gathering information through surveillance and financial records. Finally, almost 6 weeks after our initial meeting, he knocked on my door holding a large manila envelope. "Got everything you need right here," he said, handing it over. "Hotel receipts, phone logs, even photos of them together at a restaurant last week. This should put any doubts to rest." I flipped through the documents and images, a cold smile spreading across my face. "Excellent work, Mike. The truth is finally exposed." With the concrete proof of their misdeeds now in hand, my plans crystallized. It was time for the grand finale, the climactic act where betrayal met its bitter reckoning. With the evidence from Mike securely in hand, I knew the stage was set for the final act of my plan. But I also realized I couldn't do it alone. I needed allies, co-conspirators who would stand by me as witnesses and support. At first, I hesitated about bringing my family in deeper. My parents were getting older, and I didn't want to burden them unduly. Luke was still young. Could he handle the emotional intensity of what lay ahead? But as I wrestled with those doubts, my mother seemed to sense my inner turmoil. "Marianne, dear, you look exhausted," she said gently, laying a hand on my arm. "Let us help you. You shouldn't bear this burden alone." I blinked back tears and took a deep breath. "Mom, Dad, I may need to call on both of you soon for something major." They exchanged a glance, and my father nodded firmly. "Just say the word, sweetheart. Whatever you need." Luke showed up at my door shortly after, his expression grave and determined. "Heard you might be cooking up something big to take that scumbag down," he said without preamble. "Count me in." And just like that, the conspiracy was born. Over the next few days, we held clandestine meetings, plotting our moves with military precision. All of them agreed. Derek and Jenna's sins required the most severe consequences. "We have to hit them where it hurts most, socially and financially," Luke growled. "Make them radioactive in this town." Mom shook her head sadly. "I can't believe it's come to this, but they've left us no choice. Exposing their lies is the only path forward." I spread the evidence from Mike across the dining table, recounting the sordid details of the photos, receipts, and phone logs. "We'll strip them of every shred of dignity and respectability," I said, a cold finality in my tone. "They'll have to leave this town in utter disgrace." As we solidified our approach, the weight of the years of deceit fueled our collective resolve. Their betrayal had breached the most sacred bonds of family and friendship. Now they would reap the karma they deserved. "He's due back on Friday?" I told them grimly. "That's when we'll strike." The plan crystallized, a two-pronged assault that would unravel everything in their lives. First, I would strip our home bare, leaving nothing but echoing despair for Derek's return. Then Luke and I would confront Jenna directly, laying out the undeniable proof of her affair while her own husband looked on. They all nodded solemnly, their expressions a mixture of grim determination and simmering anger. "It's going to be brutal," I warned. "Are you all sure about this?" Mom reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "We're family, dear, and we always protect our own." With the plan firmly in place and my family united behind me, a strange calm settled over me in the days leading up to Derek's return. It was as if I had passed through the crucible of betrayal and emerged hardened, stripped of the naive idealism that had blinded me for so long. I went about my preparations with cold that clinical efficiency. Every item of Derek's clothing, every framed photo of us together, every scrap of his existence in our home, I packed it all into boxes and hauled it down to the garage. By the time I was done, the house was an empty shell, echoing with the hollow remnants of our shattered life. "It looks like a museum exhibit on post-apocalyptic living," Luke commented dryly as he surveyed the barren rooms. I gave a bitter chuckle. "That's exactly the point. Everything has been destroyed." Mom looked around, a pained expression on her face. "This is so final. Are you sure there's no going back from this, Marianne?" I set my jaw grimly. "After everything he's done? Absolutely not. He chose this path, and now he has to face the consequences." My mother sighed heavily but didn't argue further. We all knew the depth of Derek's betrayal. There was no salvaging anything from the wreckage of our lives. The last step was preparing my final message for him, the ultimate reveal of everything I knew about his sordid affair. I gathered stacks of the evidence Mike had uncovered, photos of Derek and Jenna in intimate embraces, receipts for hotel rooms and business trips taken together, transcripts of their lurid text exchanges. I laid it all out on the kitchen counter, organizing it meticulously. Then I composed a simple letter. "Derek, if you're reading this, then you've already seen what I've done to our house, to every trace of our life together. It's over. But there's more. I know all about your affair with Jenna. Every sordid detail, every lie and betrayal. The proof is on the counter. I've also taken steps to ensure this evidence will be seen by others. Your colleagues at the bank, Jenna's family and friends, everyone. You reap what you sow. Enjoy the karma you've earned, you miserable bastard." I read the note over a few times, the white-hot anger tempered by a strange sense of closure and liberation. This would be the final nail in the coffin of our ruined marriage. I almost pitied him for the cataclysm that was to come. Almost. With the house stripped bare and the letter penned, there was only one thing left, the confrontation with Jenna that would set the final phase of destruction into motion. Luke would be my lieutenant for that, his rage at the betrayal fueling his determination to see it through. "Tomorrow is the day," I told him firmly. "Are you ready?" He nodded, eyes glinting with icy resolve, ready to bring the hammer down hard. They'll regret the day they messed with our family. I believed him completely. Soon, They would face devastation beyond anything they could imagine, and I would get to watch every agonizing moment of it unfold. With Derek gone and Jenna soon to face her reckoning, I set about putting the final touches on my preparations. The house was a blank canvas now, waiting for his return to deliver the ultimate blow. I took the stacks of evidence, photos, receipts, transcripts, and arranged them neatly on the kitchen counter, ensuring they would be the first thing he saw upon entering. Then I placed my letter on top, its words a dagger aimed at his heart. "Dear God, it really does look post-apocalyptic in here," my mother murmured as she surveyed the stripped-bare rooms. "Are you sure about this, Marianne?" "Absolutely," I replied flatly. "He's going to walk into a world of devastation, a fitting metaphor for the utter destruction he's brought upon our lives." Mom sighed heavily but didn't argue further. Deep down, she knew the depth of Derek's betrayal made this path inevitable. With the house fully prepped, I went about removing any trace of my own existence as well. Photos of me were taken down, personal items packed away. By the time I was finished, the place was devoid of any sign of human inhabitation, past or present. I turned to Luke with grim finality. "It's done. All that's left is waiting for him to return tomorrow and witness the carnage." Luke nodded tightly. "He'll get what's coming to him soon enough, and then it's Jenna's turn." The thought of confronting her brought a cold smile to my lips. She deserved every bit as much devastation as the lying bastard she'd debased herself with. As the daylight began to fade, casting long shadows across the deserted rooms, a strange calm settled over me. It was the peace that comes from knowing a path has been set in stone, with no turning back. "Are you going to be okay tonight?" Mom asked, eyeing me with concern. "Maybe you should stay with us." I shook my head. "No, I need to be here to greet Derek when he arrives. Don't worry, I can handle it." She sighed again but didn't press the issue. After hugging me tightly, she and Dad left, leaving just Luke and me. My brother looked around the abandoned house, a muscle twitching in his jaw. "I still can't believe he did this to you. The goddamn nerve of that scumbag." "I know," I said softly, "but it's almost over now. We'll make him face the consequences and then move forward." Luke gave a curt nod. "Damn right. And tomorrow, we'll bring Jenna's world crashing down, too. I can't wait to see the look on her face." As the shadows deepened, we finally said our goodbyes, and I was left alone with the hollow silence of the house. I wandered aimlessly through the vacant rooms, my footsteps echoing in the void. Finally, I sank down on the bare floor, leaning my head against the wall. Unbidden tears traced their way down my cheeks as the full weight of everything I'd lost, everything that was about to change, washed over me. But there would be no turning back from this path, no way to undo the devastation. When Derek walked through that door tomorrow, the final act would commence, and there would be no stopping the karma that awaited him. The next morning, I woke with a sense of grim determination. Today was the day everything would come crashing down on Derek and Jenna. They were about to face the full consequences of their betrayal. I showered and dressed methodically, going through the motions as if in a trance. All around me, the house remained an empty vessel, stripped of any hint of the life that had once filled it. Luke arrived right on schedule, his expression set in hard lines. "You ready for this, sis? No turning back now." "I'm ready," I said, my voice devoid of inflection. "Let's go end this once and for all." We arrived at Jenna's modest two-story home shortly before noon. Her husband Rob's car was in the driveway, exactly as we'd hoped. I drew in a steadying breath as Luke and I approached the front door. "You take point," he muttered. "I've got your back." I nodded tightly and rang the bell. After a few moments, Jenna answered, her brow creasing in confusion at the sight of us. "Marianne? Luke, what are you doing here?" "Don't play dumb with us," I spat. "We know everything, Jenna, every filthy detail of your affair with my husband." Her eyes went wide with shock and fear. "What? I don't know what you're talking about." "Save it," Luke snarled. "We've got all the proof. Photos, texts, receipts, everything. You're going to face the consequences right here, right now." Jenna visibly paled, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. Before she could gather her wits, Rob appeared behind her in the hallway. "Jenna? What's going on?" "Nothing, honey. Just—" But Luke barreled past her, grabbing Rob by the arm. "Come out here, man. You need to see the truth about your lying, cheating wife." Rob's eyes widened in alarm as Luke half-dragged him out to the front step where I stood, stone-faced. "Marianne, what the hell is this about?" Rob demanded. I simply reached into my handbag and pulled out a thick envelope, handing it to him wordlessly. He hesitated, then opened it, his face draining of color as he began flipping through the photos and documents inside. "Oh, God," he whispered hoarsely. It's all here." Jenna was openly crying now, watching in horror as her husband uncovered the undeniable proof of her infidelity, laid out in stark black and white. "Rob, baby, please let me explain." She began through her sobs, but he turned on her with a look of pure revulsion. "Explain what? How you screwed around with Marianne's husband for years behind my back? Jesus Christ, Jenna, how could you?" He sank down onto the front step, his head in his hands. Jenna hovered over him, alternating between desperate pleas and groveling apologies. I stared at her coldly, neither pity nor satisfaction in my gaze. "Do you see now, Jenna, the destruction your lies have wrought?" Her anguished gaze met mine. "Marianne, I'm so sorry. Please, you have to believe me." "Shut up," I said flatly. "There's nothing you can say that matters anymore. You made your choices and now you'll live with them. Same as Derek will." She fell silent, shaking sobs racking her body as I turned away. "Let's go, Luke. We're done here." He nodded mutely and we left Rob crumpled on the step, his and Jenna's lives in ruins behind us. As we climbed into my car, a heavy silence settled between us. Finally, Luke spoke in a strained voice. "You were right. She deserved every ounce of that devastation." "They both did," I replied simply, staring at the road ahead. "This is the path they chose. Now we move forward." There was still one final piece to unfold, the cataclysm that awaited Derek upon his return. But Jenna and Rob's shattered world would serve as the grim preamble to what was to come. As Luke and I drove away from Jenna's house, the weight of what had just transpired pressed down on me. Their world was shattered, and soon Derek's would follow suit. Justice, cold and brutal, had been served. We arrived back at the vacant house and settled in to wait for Derek's return later that evening. An uneasy silence hung between us until Luke finally spoke up. "Do you think there's any part of you that will feel remorse?" he asked quietly. "Once it's done and the dust settles?" I didn't hesitate. "Absolutely not. They made their bed. I'm just the one who ripped the covers off and exposed them." Luke nodded slowly. "I know, you're right. They brought this devastation on themselves." The hours ticked by in tense anticipation. I tried to distract myself by cleaning and reorganizing the carefully arranged stacks of evidence on the counter. But eventually, headlights swept across the front windows. Derek was finally home. Luke and I both tensed, readying ourselves for the final confrontation. The front door opened and Derek stepped inside, suitcase in hand. "Honey, I'm back. The review meetings ran a little." His words trailed off as he took in the barren, deserted house. What the hell is going on here?" His eyes fell on the neatly arranged stacks of photos and documents on the kitchen counter. Slowly, his gaze lifted to meet mine. "Marianne," he began, his voice trembling, "what have you done? What does it look like?" I asked coldly. "I've stripped away every trace of our life together. It's over." He approached the counter, snatching up the envelope with shaking hands. As he flipped through the damning contents, his face morphed into a mask of horror. "Oh, God! Marianne, please, let me explain." "Save it," I cut him off. "There's nothing you can say. Your lies have been exposed. Your betrayal is out in the open for all to see." Derek crumpled forward onto the counter, his head in his hands as he began to sob. But there was no pity or remorse in me, only a sense of grim satisfaction watching the devastation wash over him. Finally, he lifted his tear-stained face, anguish and pleading written across his features. "Marianne, please, I'm begging you. We can work through this. I'll do anything. You had your chance, and you blew it in the most vile way imaginable." I spat. "Your sins came with consequences, and now you have to live with them." Frantically, he scanned the various documents and photos again, realization dawning on him. "Jenna, oh God, you exposed her too, didn't you?" he whispered, his eyes widening. "Her whole world is destroyed because of me." "Because of both of you," Luke growled from beside me. "You shattered 2 families with your disgusting lies." Derek just shook his head miserably, seemingly broken and defeated. I regarded him with a cold finality. "It's over, Derek. You're going to face the music for your actions, the social and professional ruin you brought on yourself. You and Jenna are finished in this town and everywhere else thanks to social media. He flinched at my words as if struck, but I felt no remorse, no desire to soften the blow. Pack up what little you have left and get out, I told him flatly. This chapter of our lives is closed. Wordlessly, he began gathering his scattered belongings as Luke and I watched in silence. Once he'd carried everything out to his car, he turned back to face me. I'm so sorry, Marianne, he whispered. For everything. I just stared at him, giving no reaction. After a long moment, he turned and walked out the door, his head bowed in utter defeat. As his car pulled away, Luke put a gentle hand on my shoulder. Are you going to be okay? I nodded slowly. Yeah, I think I will be. It's over now. I'm free of him and his web of lies. We stood silently as dusk settled over the empty house. A sense of closure, of finality took hold. The path before me was clear. Let's go, I told Luke softly. It's time for me to start over. Without a backward glance, we walked outside and climbed into my car. As we pulled away, I felt a profound sense of liberation and peace. I had prevailed through the crucible of betrayal and emerged on the other side, ready to begin living again. The reckoning was complete. Justice had been served in the most brutal way. Now it was time to heal and rebuild a life free from Derek's dark shadow. The future was mine to shape, and I would seize it with all the resilience and determination I could muster. I was ecstatic, standing in what was supposed to be the doorway to our future. But as Caleb dropped the bombshell that his parents were moving in, that doorway felt more like a trapdoor beneath my feet. Surprise! Caleb exclaimed with a grin, his arms wide as if expecting praise. My parents are going to move in with us. Won't that be great? I stood there, stunned. This was the first I'd heard of it. The joy I'd felt just moments before evaporated, replaced by a sinking feeling in my gut. We'd just finished building our dream home. I'd poured my entire life savings into it, working long hours to afford the perfect place for Caleb and I to start our new life together. After a whirlwind romance, we'd gotten married in a small ceremony 6 months ago. While Caleb's laid-back demeanor balanced my driven intensity, I sometimes worried we wanted different things. Small comments he'd made now felt like red flags. How he'd love his mom's home cooking again, how he missed seeing his parents every day. I dismissed them as sweet sentiments, but now feared they hinted at expectations I didn't share. My parents had been wholly supportive, thrilled to see their only daughter so happy. But Caleb's parents, that was another story. From our first meeting, his mother Eleanor's piercing stare and pursed lips told me she didn't approve. His meek father Don just nodded along with pursed lips. Caleb rambled on, oblivious to my dismay. We have that huge guest suite, it's perfect. Mom's been dying to spend more time together, and Dad could use some looking after. This solves everything. I blinked hard, trying to process his words. You already invited them to live here? Well, yeah, Caleb shrugged. I figured you'd be on board. I'm so excited. He pulled me in for a congratulatory hug. I stood frozen, unable to return the embrace. My mind raced. How could he have assumed this was okay? Ambushing me like this, on today of all days? I pulled back, looking Caleb in the eyes. Don't you think this is something we should have decided on together? Caleb's smile faded at my tone. I mean, they're my parents, and we have room for them. What's the issue? I gaped at him. Was he serious? The issue is that this is our home that I spent years saving for. You don't just get to invite whoever you want to live here without asking me. Whoa, calm down, Caleb said, raising his hands defensively. I figured you'd be happy about this. They're going to be your family too now. My blood boiled at his flippant response. I dreamed of a sanctuary with my new husband, full of laughter and intimacy. Instead, Caleb seemed determined to let his parents invade the space I'd sacrificed so much for. I agreed to build a home with you, Caleb, not with your parents, I said bluntly. We've been married for 6 months. Don't I deserve some say in my own home? Caleb's nonchalant facade finally cracked. Come on, don't be like this, he pleaded. They're getting older. They can't handle being alone. Don't make me choose between you and them. I froze as his words sank in. He was guilt-tripping me, making me out to be the bad guy for not immediately agreeing to his thoughtless decision, for wanting a say in the home I'd poured my life into. In that moment, I realized that dream home suddenly felt more like a gilded cage. One designed not just for Caleb and I, but now under the watchful eyes of his parents. Surveillance masked as family togetherness. Maybe I didn't know Caleb as well as I thought, but I knew myself, and I refused to be trapped. The next few days crawled by in tense silence. I busied myself with minor tasks, avoiding eye contact whenever I passed Caleb in the halls of our not-so-dream home. The joy I'd felt moving in just weeks before had curdled into resentment. I knew Caleb's parents would be arriving any day, invited without my consent to stay for who knows how long. The thought of Eleanor and Dawn invading my sanctuary made my skin crawl. But Caleb refused to discuss it further, shutting down any attempt I made to set boundaries. "Can we talk about this?" I asked as we washed dishes together one night. "I'm not comfortable with your parents staying indefinitely. Maybe we could compromise on a trial period first?" Caleb sighed, not meeting my eyes. "You're totally overreacting," he mumbled. "Just give them a chance. They're excited to help us get settled." I nearly shattered the plate I was scrubbing. Help us? More like control and criticize us if Eleanor had anything to do with it. Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. Caleb's face lit up. "They're here." He dried his hands and rushed to let them in. I followed slowly, heart sinking. There went my sanctuary. I heard Eleanor's shrill voice from the foyer. "Oh, what a unique little house this is. So modern. I could never live somewhere so cold and boxy, could you, Dawn?" Dawn just grunted in reply. My hands clenched. I designed every inch of this home after years of effort and research. I'd chosen the clean lines and contemporary style specifically. This was my dream, not theirs. Caleb and his parents came around the corner then. Eleanor frowned at my yoga pants and t-shirt. "Well, don't you look comfortable?" she said with a thin smile. Caleb shot me a warning look. I forced a pleasant tone. "Welcome. We're still unpacking, so please excuse the mess." "Oh, think nothing of it," Eleanor waved dismissively. "We're family now, after all. No need for formalities." I highly doubted she actually felt that way. I turned to Caleb, avoiding Eleanor's judgmental gaze. "Why don't you show them to the guest suite so they can settle in?" Caleb led them down the hall, Eleanor critiquing the barren, neutral decor along the way. As their voices faded, I slumped against the wall and took a deep breath. This was only day one. Surely I could make it work somehow. Caleb was my husband, and they were his parents. Over the next few days, that optimism crumbled. Eleanor criticized everything, from my avant-garde interior design to my immodest lounge clothes to my exotic cooking. Dawn trailed after her, not saying much, but occasionally chiming in with his own disparaging remark. They commandeered the kitchen, taking over meal times. They helped themselves to anything in the fridge. They left messes without cleaning up. The structured routine Caleb and I had started establishing was utterly disrupted. My attempts to discuss boundaries only led to arguments. Caleb accused me of shirking my wifely duties of keeping his parents happy. He dismissed my feelings, saying I just needed time to warm up to them. The final straw came late one night when I overheard hushed voices in the kitchen. I crept closer, realizing it was Caleb and his parents. "You need to get her under control," Eleanor said sharply. "She has no respect for family." Caleb sighed. "I'm trying, Mom. This move was supposed to help her fall in line. She resisted at first, but I think she's coming around." I reeled, mouth falling open in shock. Fall in line? This had been their plan all along, to manipulate me into total compliance through this forced living situation. Rage roared through me. I had to take back control, starting by kicking these toxic leeches out of my home. The next morning, I woke up feeling like a pressure cooker about to blow. After what I'd overheard, any shred of optimism I had about making this work had vanished. I found Caleb in the kitchen and steeled myself. "We need to talk. Now." Caleb frowned, glancing around. "Keep your voice down. My parents are still sleeping." I crossed my arms. "Fine, but we're having this discussion." I led him out to the back deck and took a deep breath. "This isn't working. You need to tell your parents they have to move out." Caleb's eyes widened. "Are you crazy? They just got here. You can't just kick them out." My anger swelled. "This is my house that I paid for, and if I don't want them here, they can't stay." Caleb stepped closer, looming over me. "You're being ridiculous. They're family now, whether you like it or not." I refuse to be intimidated. They have treated me horribly since the moment they arrived, criticizing my home, my clothes, my cooking. Nothing is good enough for your Royal Highness Eleanor, I snapped. Caleb scowled. You're exaggerating. They're just trying to help you be a better wife and homemaker. I thought you'd appreciate the advice. I gaped at him. Help me. They've destroyed our home dynamic and undermined me at every turn. Before Caleb could argue further, we heard the back door slide open. Speak of the devil, it was Eleanor. There you are, she said to Caleb, ignoring me completely. Your father needs help programming the TV remote. This modern technology is so needlessly complicated. Caleb shot me a warning look. I'll be right there, Mom. Eleanor nodded, then wrinkled her nose at me. Oh, Jenna dear, you look so unkempt this morning. Didn't you have time to put yourself together? I was still in pajamas with messy hair at 11 a.m. on a Saturday. Not that I owed her any explanation about my choices in my own home. I forced a smile. Just focused on some other priorities first. Please excuse my appearance. She shook her head. A wife should always present herself properly. Don't you agree, Caleb? Of course, Mom, Caleb replied. My fists clenched. I wanted to scream. After Caleb left with her, I took some deep breaths. Then I heard noises from down the hall. They were rifling through my office. I rushed over to find Eleanor sitting at my desk, Dawn digging through my filing cabinet. What are you doing? I demanded. They looked up, startled. Oh, we were just looking for the takeout menus so we could order lunch, Eleanor said casually. I strode over and slammed the filing cabinet shut, barely missing Dawn's fingers. Get out! My voice was ice. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. Now, that's no way to speak to your in-laws. We were simply... I said, get out! I shouted. This is my office, my private space. You have no right to go through my things without permission. They scurried out, grumbling under their breaths about my shrill tone and disrespect. As they left, I caught a glimpse of a paper on my desk, my bank statement. Boiling rage flooded me. They had been snooping through my financial records. These toxic, manipulative leeches had to go. Today. I had tried reason, compromise, patience. None of it mattered. They believed I was an obstacle in their plan to control Caleb and get their claws further into my life. Well, they had no idea who they were dealing with. I was done being nice. I would do whatever it took to cut them out of my home and my marriage for good. After the office invasion, I'd had enough. The time had come for drastic measures. I was kicking them out. I found Caleb in the living room and asked to speak privately. He reluctantly followed me to the bedroom. Your parents need to leave. Today, I said bluntly. Caleb's eyebrows shot up. You're insane if you think I'm kicking my parents to the curb just because you can't get along with them, Caleb spat. I held firm. Either they go willingly or I'll have them forcibly removed for trespassing. They have no rights here. This is my house. Caleb's face reddened with anger. You would really have my elderly parents thrown into the street? What kind of heartless bitch are you? His cruel words stung, but I didn't let it show. They're manipulative liars. All they've done is undermine and control me since they got here. I overheard you all conspiring to get me in line. I'm done being a pawn in your twisted family game. Panic flashed across Caleb's face. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to uncover their scheme. You're imagining things, he scoffed. They just want what's best for us. I rolled my eyes. The only thing your parents care about is controlling you and isolating you from me. If you can't see that, you're more delusional than I thought. Caleb's lips curled in a sneer. Careful, Jenna. Keep running your mouth and you'll force my hand. I stood tall. Go ahead and play your hand, because unless they leave today, mine will be an eviction notice. His eyes bored into me, jaw clenched. For a moment, I thought he might get violent, but instead he took a breath and lowered his voice. Okay, let's say they did leave. Then what? His tone turned mocking. You get your perfect little sanctuary back? Your precious home unsullied by my family? I didn't respond, waiting for him to get to the point. Here are your options. Caleb stepped closer. 1, you accept my parents living here gracefully. 2, I divorce you and take half. We sell this place and you start over. I reeled as his ultimatum sunk in. He would actually threaten to destroy our marriage, just to keep his toxic parents around. Any love I'd once felt for him dried up in that moment. Fine, I said icily. I'll have the divorce papers ready by tomorrow morning. Shock spread across Caleb's face. Clearly, he hadn't expected me to call his bluff. Too bad for him. I refused to be manipulated any longer, not even by my spineless excuse for a husband. I grabbed my purse and strode to the door. Caleb scrambled after me. "Where are you going?" he demanded. "To contact my lawyer." I slammed the door behind me, blocking out his sputtering protests. As I pulled out of the driveway, an immense feeling of relief washed over me. I was getting my life back. Over the next few hours, I talked to my lawyer and realtor. My name was the only one on both the mortgage and deed. I had full legal claim to the house. Financial accounts were separate, with no communal assets. Caleb had no leverage. His tantrums and threats were empty. The only tie binding us was a flimsy marriage certificate, and that would soon be shredded. I returned that evening with steely calm. Caleb's parents had conveniently made themselves scarce. Caleb appeared, contrite. "Look, can't we talk about this?" he pleaded. "I overreacted earlier. Don't do anything drastic." I held up the manila envelope from my lawyer. "The only talking now will be between our attorneys. Right, I'm filing for divorce first thing tomorrow." Caleb's face fell. For a moment I almost pitied him. He'd gambled on my compliance and lost everything. But I refused to be swayed by sentimentality. Not when my home, independence, and self-worth were at stake. He reached for me, desperation in his eyes. "Jenna, please." I stepped out of reach. "They'll need to be gone before the sheriff arrives to escort them out. I'll be staying in a hotel until then." Without another glance, I walked out. The dream home Caleb had lured me into was now just a crime scene. It was time to start fresh, without my failed marriage and without the in-laws from hell. The next few days passed in a blur. I split my time between my lawyer's office and the hotel, ironing out divorce details and avoiding the toxicity at home. My phone blew up constantly with calls and texts from Caleb, ranging from desperate pleading to vicious insults. His attempts to manipulate me back under his control only steeled my resolve further. I returned to the house once to check their moving progress. As expected, Caleb's parents were still clinging on. "You can't just throw us out with no place to go," Eleanor shrieked as I did a walkthrough. "I gave you fair warning," I said calmly. "You had plenty of time to make arrangements." Don scowled from the couch. "We sold our house to move here with our son, as he promised we could. Now where will we go?" I shrugged. "That's not my concern anymore. Staying here was never part of the deal." I left them ranting and went to find Caleb packing up the bedroom. His eyes were bloodshot, hair disheveled. The cocky arrogance he'd once radiated was gone. "Jenna, be reasonable," he pleaded. "We can work this out. Just tell me what you want." I paused, looking him over. The man I'd fallen for seemed like a stranger now. "What I want is for this toxic situation to end. My lawyer will be in touch." I started to leave when Caleb suddenly grabbed my wrist, hard enough to bruise. For the first time I felt afraid. "Don't do this, Jenna," he hissed through clenched teeth. "You have no idea what you're starting here." Adrenaline coursed through me. I wrenched my arm from his grip. "Threaten me again, and you'll only make things worse for yourself," I said coldly. Then I walked away without looking back. Soon enough, moving day arrived. With police on standby, the hostile holdouts were finally extracted from my home. Caleb glared daggers at me as they drove away in defeat. I stood on the front steps, surveying the mess they'd left behind. Caleb had clearly trashed the place in spite and anger, but the feeling of peace and freedom was worth any amount of cleanup. As I began tidying up, my phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. I answered hesitantly, wondering if it was another bullying tirade from Caleb, but instead a cheerful female voice responded. "Hi, is this Jenna? Caleb's wife?" I bristled at being identified that way now. "Soon-to-be ex-wife, yes." "Oh." She sounded surprised but not unkind. "I'm so sorry, I hadn't heard. I'm Lucy, chair of the Neighborhood Homeowners Association Board. We wanted to check in on the situation." As she explained further, I realized word had spread about my in-law infestation, and the community was on my side. Lucy said neighbors had observed their rude, entitled behavior around town. Everyone was appalled when they learned of their unwanted presence in my home and the abusive way Caleb had enabled them. "You're so brave for standing up to them," Lucy said supportively. "Please let us know if you need anything. We want you to feel safe and welcome here." I was touched by the unexpected compassion from relative strangers. After feeling isolated and trapped for so long, knowing others saw the injustice of what I'd endured was validating beyond measure. Over the next few days, the neighborhood outrage became even clearer. I noticed people glaring when Caleb came to pick up more of his things. Friends he'd introduced me to stopped returning his calls. No one offered him sympathy or support. At first he seemed oblivious, ranting to me about their disloyalty. But soon enough, the shunning seemed to wear him down. I caught him sitting in his car down the street one day, head in hands. For once, he seemed to grasp the impact of his actions. Not just on me, but on how the whole community now viewed him. I almost felt bad seeing him so despondent. Then I remembered the months of manipulation he'd put me through. He'd brought this social exile on himself. As I reclaimed my home and independence, Caleb was losing everything he'd tried to build here, all because he'd gambled on my obedience to his family's cruelty. He was about to learn a hard lesson about karma's payback. After finally reclaiming my home, I settled back into a comfortable routine. The constant tension, headaches, and knots in my shoulders dissipated. For the first time in months, I could relax completely in my own space, until one night when a furious pounding on the front door jolted me upright. I crept to the window and peered out cautiously. My heart dropped. It was Caleb, with his irate parents in tow. "Open up, Jenna," Caleb yelled, still pounding. "You can't lock us out of our own home." I steeled my nerves and opened the door a crack. "I told you, this is my home now. You have no right to be here." Caleb tried pushing his way in, but I held firm. Eleanor clicked her tongue disapprovingly over my shoulder. "Don't be petty, Jenna," she scolded. "We left some things behind. Let us in to collect them." I shook my head. "I'll have them delivered to you. Now please leave before I call the police." Caleb snarled, shoving hard against the door. I couldn't hold him back. They streamed in as I stumbled back. "You can't keep me from my own house," Caleb shouted, getting in my face. "We had an agreement, remember? My parents live here, or no marriage." Heart pounding, I stood up straighter. I refused to cower in my own domain. "The agreement is void now that we're getting divorced," I said firmly. "And I have full legal rights to this property. So I'm telling you one last time, get out of my house." Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "You young people and your melodrama. You'll come to your senses eventually. Now step aside and let us by." They tried pushing past me towards the bedrooms. Adrenaline flooded my veins. I wasn't about to surrender control again. In one swift motion, I pulled out my phone and hit the panic button app linked to the security system, triggering the blaring alarm. Caleb and his parents clamped their hands over their ears, shouting in protest. I seized the moment of distraction to corral them back towards the entryway. Just then, flashing blue and red lights appeared outside as police vehicles pulled up, alerted by the alarm. The commotion must have also drawn the neighbors' attention, as heads started poking out of windows and doors down the street. 2 officers approached with stern expressions. "We received a panic alert from this residence. Is there a problem here?" Caleb tried to respond, but I stepped forward first. "Yes, officers, I need your help. My soon-to-be ex-husband and in-laws are trespassing after I've asked them multiple times to leave." I showed them the divorce paperwork and restraining order application. The officers nodded in understanding. "You 3 need to come with us," they said to my stunned intruders. Caleb protested loudly about it being his house, too, as they escorted the defiant trio out. Before the door closed, Eleanor shot me a chilling stare. "You'll regret this," she hissed. I stood in the doorway, heart pounding with adrenaline, but I held her gaze steadily. I wasn't about to show fear or weakness now, not after everything I'd overcome. This was my home, my sanctuary, and I would defend it against anyone seeking to control or destroy it, or me. As the police cars pulled away, I turned to see my neighbors congregating, offering smiles and thumbs up. Lucy even raised her glass in a mock toast before heading back inside. For the second time, I'd faced down my tormentors. But this victory was even sweeter, knowing my neighbors had my back. I shut the front door, leaving the chaos outside. The police could handle Caleb and his parents now. I'd take back command of my inner peace. After all, karma had my side. And her payback wasn't finished yet. In the weeks after the showdown, I anxiously awaited retaliation from Caleb and his parents. But instead, what I heard surprised me. Rumors spread that Eleanor and Don had been rejected by every senior living facility they applied to, due to past behavioral issues. Forced to move far from family, they were isolated and miserable. Caleb's graphic design business began struggling too. Former clients pulled projects and refused to give referrals. His social media pages were flooded with scathing comments about how he'd mistreated me. Part of me felt bad as they faced the consequences of their actions. No matter how cruel they'd been, I hadn't wished such misfortune on them. But I also recognized this was their own karma, coming full circle. They'd tried manipulating me in my own home. Now they were the ones feeling powerless and adrift. Oddly, I found myself almost missing the daily drama and confrontation. The empty stillness of the house without Caleb was jarring. Building something from scratch had sounded energizing at first. Now the unknown path ahead seemed daunting. An unexpected knock at the door pulled me from my thoughts one quiet evening. I peered out cautiously. It was Lucy from the HOA. "Hey, Jenna, glad I caught you," she said warmly. "The neighborhood ladies were hoping you could come to our book club next week. We'd love to have you join us." I was touched by the gesture. "That's so kind of you. I'd love to come." As we chatted, Lucy gave me an update on the Caleb situation. She was on the HOA board for their new community as well, which had promptly evicted them after yet another dramatic run-in with security. I shook my head. Even completely uprooted, they hadn't changed their ways. At least I knew I'd made the right decision removing their toxicity from my life. Lucy and I soon fell into easy conversation. I realized how starved I'd been for friendship. I'd spent so long isolated, just trying to survive. Eventually, talk turned to my plans for the future. Lucy's eyes lit up as I hesitantly mentioned wanting to start a support group for women escaping toxic or abusive relationships. "Jenna, that's an amazing idea. You could help so many people who feel alone like you did," she said enthusiastically. Her encouragement filled me with renewed purpose. I dreamed of a sanctuary where people supported each other, not competed or controlled. Now I could create that myself. When book club night arrived, I entered Lucy's home with nervous anticipation. But the ladies welcomed me warmly, treating me as one of their own immediately. As we discussed the novel, one woman confided about leaving her critical, dismissive husband. Another described setting boundaries against intrusive in-laws. Their stories resonated all too well. Then they turned to me, listening intently as I shared a brief version of my own saga. The compassion and solidarity in their responses overwhelmed me. These virtual strangers had shown me more care and respect in one evening than Caleb's family had in months. I realized this must be what true community felt like. In that moment, my vision for the support group crystallized. I could channel my painful experience into helping build connections and strength. After book club, Lucy walked me out. "You're always welcome here," she said, squeezing my shoulder. I thanked her, wiping away a stray tear. Then I took a deep breath of the cool night air. For the first time in forever, it felt like home. Seasons changed, and life settled into a comfortable rhythm. My support group flourished, becoming a refuge for people healing from toxic relationships. Members celebrated victories, offered empathy for setbacks, and found strength in shared wisdom. Watching them bloom gave me a profound sense of purpose. I was determined to nurture this community so that no one else had to face hardship alone. With Caleb and his parents fading into a distant nightmare, I felt ready to start fresh. Lucy set me up on a few dates, which helped me remember laughter and romance. One night after a meetup with Andrew, a charming accountant, I came home to find Caleb sitting on my front steps. I froze, old anxieties flooding back at the sight of him. He stood up slowly, hands raised in a conciliatory gesture. "Hey, Jenna, I just wanted to talk, clear the air." Every instinct told me to turn him away, but he looked so haggard and defeated. I decided to at least hear him out. I crossed my arms. "Say what you came here to say." Caleb shuffled his feet, avoiding eye contact. "I messed up. I know that now. I was selfish and blind, and you have every right to hate me." His raw honesty surprised me. The old Caleb never would have admitted fault. "I let my parents manipulate me, and I tried doing the same to you." His voice broke. "You didn't deserve that. I'm so sorry." Part of me softened, seeing this remorseful, humbled man in place of the hostile stranger from before, but I couldn't erase the damage done. "You put me through hell," I said bluntly. Your parents treated me horribly and you enabled them. An apology doesn't change that. Caleb nodded, looking resigned. You're absolutely right. I don't expect your forgiveness. I just hope someday you can find peace. He turned to leave. I thought of Andrew's warmth and support, the possibility of a partnership based on trust. A clean slate waited for me, but closure was needed first. Caleb, wait, I called after him. He looked back, wary but hopeful. I chose my words carefully. I appreciate you taking accountability, and I wish you well, but our paths diverged long ago. Caleb managed a sad smile. I understand. For what it's worth, I'll always regret how things ended with us. Thank you for hearing me out. As I watched him drive away, an astonishing sense of calm washed over me. That painful chapter had finally closed. Later at book club, I told the ladies about Caleb's apology. They congratulated me on finding closure while still upholding my boundaries. You're free of that mess for good now, Lucy said, raising her wine glass. The others cheered in agreement. Their solidarity never failed to lift me up. I realized then that the home I'd tried creating with Caleb had been an illusion. My true home was here, among these people who embraced me fully. Over time, Caleb faded to a distant memory. Meanwhile, Andrew and I grew closer, bonding over long talks, easy affection, and my awful attempts at cooking. One night, as we cuddled watching TV, Andrew gestured around my cozy living room. You've made such a beautiful home, he said. I squeezed his hand, smiling contentedly. This house represented my resilience and independence, but it was the community I'd built that made it feel complete. Our home, I whispered. The fluorescent lights of the hospital room flickered, casting long shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. I was propped up in my bed, a myriad of tubes and monitors attached to me, when Ethan walked in. His gait was confident, almost too confident for someone who was supposed to be recovering from major surgery. My surgery. The surgery where I had given him a part of me, quite literally, to save his life. Laura, we need to talk, Ethan began, avoiding my gaze. His voice was steady, but there was an undercurrent of unease. I nodded, bracing myself for what was to come, but nothing could have prepared me for his next words. I think we should get a divorce. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt as if the ground had been yanked from under me. What? I managed to choke out, my voice barely above a whisper. Ethan finally met my gaze, his eyes cold and detached. Look, Laura, you can't take care of the house or me anymore. This situation has made it clear. You're not the partner I need. I was stunned into silence. The man who stood before me, the man I had loved and cared for, seemed like a stranger. But I just gave you part of my liver. I saved your life. My voice cracked with emotion, a mixture of disbelief and anger bubbling to the surface. That's just it, Laura. You did save my life, and I'll be forever grateful. But gratitude isn't enough to sustain a marriage. We've been drifting apart for years, and this is just the final straw. His words cut deeper than any scalpel ever could. I had laid on that operating table for him, endured pain and risked my life, and this was how he repaid me? With coldness and divorce papers? You knew what you were signing up for when we got married, I retorted, my anger rising. You promised to be there in sickness and in health. Or does that only apply when it's convenient for you? Ethan sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I know what I said, Laura, but people change, situations change. I need to think about my future, and I can't see you in it anymore. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to tell him how unfair this was, but the words died in my throat. Instead, I whispered, So this is it? You're abandoning me when I need you the most? It's not like that, Laura. I can't be the person you want me to be. I'm sorry. Without another word, Ethan turned and left the room, leaving me alone with my thoughts and a heart shattered into a million pieces. As the door clicked shut, a bitter laugh escaped my lips. The irony of it all wasn't lost on me. Ethan, the man who couldn't bear the thought of caring for his sick wife, was alive because of me. And now he was walking away, free to live his life, while I lay here, broken and betrayed. In that moment, a fire ignited within me, burning away the remnants of my affection for Ethan. He wanted a divorce? Fine. But I wouldn't make it easy for him. I would fight back, and I would make sure he regretted this day for the rest of his life. The days turned into weeks, and the hospital room felt more like a prison than a place of healing. Each day blended into the next, marked only by the visits from doctors and the occasional obligatory check-in from Ethan's family, who seemed more concerned with his well-being than mine. It was during one of these long, lonely afternoons that I found myself reflecting on the past, on how Ethan and I had arrived at this painful juncture. Our story began at the small publishing firm where we both worked. Ethan, with his keen insight into political affairs, and I, a hopeful comic artist, found ourselves drawn together by our shared ambition and love for the written word. Our relationship blossomed quickly, fueled by late-night discussions about our dreams and aspirations. Ethan was charming, passionate about his work, and seemingly devoted to me. When he proposed, it felt like a dream come true. However, the dream began to crumble soon after our wedding. Ethan's career took off, and he became consumed by his work, leaving me to manage the household alone. Our conversations, once filled with mutual respect and understanding, turned into heated debates about my role in our marriage. "You knew what you were getting into when you married me, Laura," Ethan would say whenever I voiced my loneliness or dissatisfaction. "I need a partner who supports my career, not someone who needs constant attention." I remember trying to express how isolated I felt, only to be met with dismissal. "Laura, you're overreacting. We're doing fine. You just need to find something to keep you busy," he'd respond, his eyes glued to his phone or laptop, never really seeing me. The realization that Ethan saw me more as a convenience than a partner was a bitter pill to swallow. I threw myself into my comics, pouring my heart and soul into the panels, trying to fill the growing void between us. My characters lived vibrant, fulfilling lives, stark contrasts to my own, which seemed to be shrinking with each passing day. It was during a family gathering that Ethan's mother, perhaps sensing my growing despair, pulled me aside. "Laura, I'm sorry. Ethan has always been driven, but you don't deserve to be pushed aside. You're family now, and we're here for you, even if he's not." Those words, meant to comfort, only deepened my sense of failure. How had my life become a series of apologies and excuses for the man I loved? Our marriage, once the source of my happiness, had become a facade. I was living with a man who valued his career and social standing more than our relationship, a man who believed my sacrifice and support were simply parts of the role I had agreed to play. The love and partnership I had once believed in had dissolved into a business arrangement, one that Ethan was now seeking to terminate because I had become an inconvenient liability. As I lay in the hospital bed staring at the sterile white walls, I realized that Ethan's request for a divorce wasn't just the end of our marriage, it was my chance to reclaim my life. No longer would I be the silent supporter, the convenient wife. I would fight back, not just for the sake of revenge, but to regain my dignity and self-worth. Ethan thought he could discard me after everything I had done for him, after I had literally given a piece of myself to save his life. But I would show him that I was more than just a caretaker, more than just his wife. I was Laura Barnes, and I would not be underestimated. The resolve that had sparked in me the day Ethan walked out of my hospital room had now turned into a roaring blaze. I was ready to face whatever came next, armed with the truth and a newfound strength that Ethan had never seen. The day Ethan was diagnosed with cirrhosis was the day our fragile semblance of a marriage was put to the ultimate test. I remember the cold, clinical tone of the doctor as he explained the severity of Ethan's condition. "Without a liver transplant, Mr. Barnes's prognosis is very poor," he had said, his gaze shifting between Ethan and me. Ethan's reaction was one of sheer denial. There must be some mistake. "I feel fine," he protested, but the evidence was irrefutable. The lifestyle he had led, the endless work events accompanied by heavy drinking, had taken their toll. It was then, in the stark, impersonal hospital room, that Ethan turned to me with a desperation I had never seen in him before. "Laura, you're my only hope. Please, I need you." The weight of his plea hung heavily between us. Despite everything, the part of me that had loved him, that still cared for him on some level, couldn't turn away. "If I'm a match, I'll do it," I said, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. The tests confirmed that I was indeed a suitable donor, and the surgery was scheduled. The days leading up to it were a blur of paperwork, medical consultations, and a profound sense of loneliness. Ethan's family thanked me, their gratitude genuine, yet tinged with the unspoken acknowledgement of Ethan's role in his own predicament. "Thank you, Laura. You're doing a brave thing," Ethan's mother had said, her eyes wet with unshed tears. But Ethan's response was markedly different, almost indifferent, as if he considered my sacrifice a mere transaction. "You're saving my career, Laura. I won't forget this," he had said, but the warmth I had once felt for him was gone, replaced by a hollow emptiness. The surgery itself was a success, at least for Ethan. He recovered quickly, buoyed by the prospect of returning to his life, his career. I, on the other hand, faced complications. The physical pain was nothing compared to the realization that Ethan viewed my suffering as a necessary inconvenience, a stepping stone on his path to recovery. During one of his rare visits to my hospital room, Ethan's true feelings became painfully clear. "You know, this really puts things into perspective. I need to focus on my recovery, on getting back to work. We'll talk about us later," he had said, avoiding my gaze. "Us? What's there to talk about?" "You've made your priorities clear, Ethan," I retorted, the bitterness in my voice surprising even me. Ethan had merely shrugged, the gesture dismissive. "Laura, you knew what you were getting into when you married me. My career has always been my priority. You agreed to support me, remember?" That conversation was a turning point for me. It crystallized the stark reality of our marriage. To Ethan, I was nothing more than a means to an end, a convenient solution to his problems. My well-being, my dreams, my sacrifices were irrelevant to him. As Ethan left the room, his footsteps echoing hollowly in the sterile corridor, a resolve hardened within me. I would no longer be the silent, suffering wife. Ethan had taken everything from me, my love, my liver, and now he sought to discard me when I was no longer of use to him. But I would not let him. I would fight back, not just for myself, but for every moment of neglect, every dismissive word, every sacrifice made in vain. Ethan Barnes would learn that my generosity came with a price, one that he would pay dearly. In the sterile ambience of Ethan's lawyer's office, I found myself sitting across from the man I once vowed to spend my life with. Ethan's demeanor was a mixture of impatience and arrogance, a stark contrast to the gravity of our meeting. Without any preamble, he pushed a set of documents toward me. "Let's get this over with," Ethan said, barely hiding his disdain. "I've offered you a fair settlement. Everything is in order." I scanned the documents, my heart sinking with each word. "Fair?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my tone. "You think abandoning your wife after she saved your life is fair?" Ethan smirked, a cold glint in his eyes. "I'm just being realistic, Laura. Our marriage was over long before this. It's better for both of us to move on." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension, but Ethan waved him off, his focus solely on me. "Look, Laura, I'm starting a new chapter in my life. I suggest you do the same. Take the settlement. It's more than generous given the circumstances." His words stung, a brutal reminder of the transactional nature of what our marriage had devolved into. "A new chapter? At my expense?" I retorted, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "You owe me for every sacrifice, every ignored plea for attention, every moment of pain." Ethan laughed, a sound that sent shivers down my spine. "You're delusional if you think you're entitled to anything more. I made you who you are. Without me, you're nothing." That was the last straw. The pain and humiliation I had endured crystallized into a fierce resolve. "We'll see about that, Ethan. You may think you've won, but this is far from over. I'll make sure of it." As I left the office, Ethan's facade of confidence seemed to crack, revealing a flicker of doubt. The battle lines were drawn, and I was no longer the woman he thought he could easily discard. The days that followed were a blur of strategizing and planning. Mark, a colleague and friend, became my ally in the quest for justice. Over coffee one afternoon, I shared the full extent of Ethan's betrayal, my words painting a vivid picture of the man behind the public persona. "He can't get away with this, Laura," Mark said, his anger mirroring my own. "You deserve better. We need to expose him for who he truly is." "I agree," I replied, the weight of my decision heavy on my shoulders. "It's time for some well-deserved karma." Together, we crafted a plan that was both bold and risky. Utilizing Mark's connections, we secured an interview with a prominent online platform known for its investigative journalism. The piece would detail my side of the story, laying bare Ethan's deceit and manipulation for the world to see. On the day the article was published, I felt a mix of fear and vindication. The headline alone, "The Unseen Sacrifice, a Wife's Tale of Betrayal and Bravery," was a testament to the journey I had embarked upon. Ethan's reaction was swift and predictable. His fury came through the phone line, palpable and venomous. "How dare you do this to me, Laura? You'll pay for this." "It's only the truth, Ethan," I responded, my voice calm but firm. "Something you've been running from for far too long." "You think you can destroy me?" "I'll sue you for defamation," he threatened, his voice a blend of anger and desperation. "Go ahead and try," I countered, a sense of empowerment coursing through me. "Everything in that article is the truth, and I have the evidence to prove it. It's your word against mine, and the court of public opinion has already made its verdict." The call ended with Ethan slamming the phone down, but I remained unfazed. I had taken the first step in reclaiming my life and dignity, no longer a silent victim of Ethan's cruelty. As the fallout from the article began to unfold, with Ethan's public image and career taking a hit, I watched from a distance. There was no joy in my heart, only a solemn satisfaction that justice was finally being served. I had started this fight to expose the truth, not for revenge, but to reclaim my voice that Ethan had tried so hard to silence. Now, standing on the precipice of a new beginning, I knew the hardest battles were still ahead. But for the first time in a long time, I felt ready to face them head on. The aftermath of the article's publication was like watching a slow-motion collapse of Ethan's carefully constructed world. My phone buzzed continuously with notifications, texts from old friends, colleagues, and even strangers expressing their support and sharing their own stories of disillusionment and betrayal. It was overwhelming, yet validating. Ethan, on the other hand, found himself in the eye of a storm he could no longer control. The first crack in Ethan's armor appeared publicly when a video of him confronting a journalist went viral. His anger, usually so well masked by charm and wit, was on full display for the world to see. "Why don't you tell the real story about how Laura is trying to ruin my life?" Ethan spat at the journalist, who merely replied, "We're just interested in the truth, Mr. Barnes." The truth. A concept so foreign to Ethan, it seemed to enrage him further. His tirade continued, unaware of the cameras recording every word, every gesture of disdain. This was not the Ethan the public knew and admired. This was the man I had lived with, fought with, and ultimately left. As Ethan's public persona unraveled, I received a call from Mark, his voice tinged with excitement and anticipation. "Have you seen the latest? Ethan's self-destructing. Your story has opened the floodgates. People are coming forward with their own experiences." I hadn't anticipated the breadth of the impact. I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's more than I expected. I just wanted to share my story, not this." Mark was quick to reassure me. "Laura, you did the right thing. Ethan's true colors needed to be exposed. The world needed to see him for who he really is." As Ethan's life spiraled, his attempts to regain control became more desperate and pathetic. Sponsors withdrew their support. His social media became a battleground, and his professional engagements dried up. The man who once held the power to sway public opinion was now a pariah, his words dissected and discredited. The culmination of Ethan's downfall came one evening when I saw him pleading his case on a low-rated talk show, a far cry from the influential platforms he once frequented. "I've been misrepresented," Ethan claimed, his voice lacking its usual conviction. "This is a coordinated attack on my character." But the host was unsympathetic. "The evidence suggests otherwise, Mr. Barnes. Your actions, your words, have led us here. It seems you are your own worst enemy." Watching Ethan flounder, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was no satisfaction in seeing him destroyed, no joy in his suffering. What I felt was a somber recognition of the inevitable conclusion to a story that had started the moment Ethan chose his ambition over our marriage, his ego over our partnership. The chapter closes not with a celebration of victory, but with a quiet contemplation of the cost of truth. Ethan's downfall was a public spectacle, but for me, it was a deeply personal closure to a chapter of my life that had brought me to the brink. I turned off the TV and looked around my quiet apartment, the noise of Ethan's downfall fading into the background. It was time to move forward, to rebuild not just my life, but my sense of self. Ethan's legacy would be one of caution and regret, but mine was still unwritten. And with each passing day, I was finding the strength to write a new chapter, one defined by resilience, dignity, and an unyielding pursuit of truth. Ethan's downfall from grace wasn't just a spectacle. It became a cautionary tale whispered within the corridors of power and across social media platforms. His attempts to salvage his reputation only dug his grave deeper, each denial and accusation against me serving to alienate him further from the court of public opinion. A few weeks after the tumultuous interview, Ethan reached out to me directly for the first time since the article's publication. His voice, once confident and commanding, now carried a note of desperation. "Laura, please," Ethan pleaded over the phone. "We need to talk. This has gone too far. Can't we just meet and sort this out?" His words, meant to sway, only served to remind me of the countless times his promises had fallen flat. "Sort this out?" I echoed, my tone incredulous. "Ethan, there's nothing left to sort. You made your choices." "But I'm losing everything," Ethan stammered, the facade of the unflappable commentator crumbling. "Can't you see? This vendetta of yours is destroying me." I paused, weighing my response. "This isn't a vendetta, Ethan. It's accountability, something you've avoided for far too long." Ethan's reply was a mix of anger and pleading. "I'll make it right, Laura. Just help me stop this madness." "Stop it," I replied, a resolve strengthening within me. "Ethan, the only madness was thinking you could treat people the way you did without consequence. You're on your own." The call ended with a click, and I was left with the silence of my apartment, a stark contrast to the turmoil Ethan was facing. His empire, built on charisma and manipulation, was now just ruins, his legacy tarnished by his own actions. The weeks that followed saw Ethan's public appearances dwindle to nothing. The few platforms that once vied for his insights now shunned him, his name becoming synonymous with betrayal and deceit. Even his social media, once a battleground of support and condemnation, went silent, as if the world had moved on, leaving Ethan Barnes a mere footnote in a relentless news cycle. But the true extent of Ethan's downfall was brought home to me one evening when Mark called, his voice somber. "Have you heard? Ethan's been let go from his consultancy. Apparently, the firm wants to distance themselves from any controversy." I hadn't heard, and the news left me with a complex knot of emotions. Ethan had built his career on being the voice of reason, the insightful commentator who could unravel complex political landscapes with ease. Now he was voiceless, his fall from grace complete. "It's a shame," I found myself saying, not just for Ethan, but for all that had been lost along the way. "He had potential, Mark. He just lost sight of what was important." Mark agreed, the conversation drifting to other topics, but my thoughts remained on Ethan. In his relentless pursuit of success, he had sacrificed everything, including those who cared for him. His downfall was not just a failure of character, but a warning of the price of ambition unchecked by empathy or responsibility. As I hung up the phone, the finality of Ethan's situation settled over me. There was no joy in his loss, no sense of victory in his defeat. Instead, there was a quiet acknowledgement of the inevitable outcome of a life lived at the expense of others. Turning away from the window, I realized that while Ethan's story might have ended, mine was just beginning. Freed from the shadow of his deceit, I could finally start anew, building a future on my terms, defined not by the pain of the past, but by the promise of tomorrow. I jolted awake to the sound of heavy footsteps storming down the hall. My heart hammered as I curled around my belly, shielding my unborn child from the rage I knew was coming. The door flew open and Dane's hulking frame filled the doorway, reeking of cigarettes and stale beer. "Get up," he barked, grabbing my arm and wrenching me off the bed. I cried out as pain exploded through my shoulder. "The baby," I gasped. "Do you think I care about that thing?" He threw me to the floor. "This is my house. You serve me." Tears flooded my eyes. This was not the tender man I had fallen in love with 2 years ago. Dane had shown me affection and stability when I had none, had needed it so desperately after my parents died. My brother Tobin took me in, but soon had a family of his own to provide for. When we met, Dane made me feel safe, hopeful. Now he was a stranger, consumed by rage and jealousy. "On your feet," Dane snapped, kicking me in the ribs. I curled around my belly, shielding the tiny life within. "Please," I prayed my child would be spared from his fury. Dane grabbed my hair and yanked my head back. "Look at me," he bellowed. I obeyed, steeling myself. His eyes, once warm, were now hard and ruthless. You will learn respect. He drew back his fist. I braced for the impact, for the explosion of pain. Crash! The front door splintered open. Heavy footsteps pounded toward us. Tobin and Kira burst into the room, faces twisted in rage at the sight of me cowering before my husband. Get away from her! Tobin roared, grabbing Dane and slamming him against the wall. My brother's strength had always paled next to Dane's bulk, but now Tobin's fury made him formidable. Kira rushed toward me, horror etched across her delicate features. Alara! My God! She helped me sit up, her touch infinitely gentle next to the abuse I had become accustomed to. I leaned into her embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude. She's my wife, Dane spat at Tobin. This is none of your business. The hell it isn't. Tobin's eyes blazed. She's coming with us. If you come near her again, I swear to God I'll kill you. I trembled in Kira's arms. Could this nightmare finally be over? Dane wrenched out of Tobin's grasp. For a moment, the two men stared each other down. My husband's eyes promised revenge for this humiliation. But seeing my protectors filled me with something long absent from my life. Hope. Whatever came next, at least I would not face it alone. At least my child would be born free of Dane's tyranny. I placed a hand over my belly, soothing the little flutter within. As Tobin and Kira led me safely into the light of day, I swore my unborn son or daughter would never suffer my fate. Not when I had two guardians willing to stand up to the dark. I winced as Kira dabbed antiseptic on my swollen lip. We sat in her and Tobin's tiny kitchen while my brother paced, raking his hands through his hair. Why didn't you tell me it was this bad? Tobin asked, agony etched on his face. My tongue probed the tender split in my lip. I was ashamed, I whispered, and scared. Dane said if I told anyone. I shook my head, tears burning. Tobin crouched before me, gentle despite his fury. Alara, listen to me. That bastard will never lay a hand on you again. I swear it. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Since our parents died, Tobin had been my guardian angel. He was the one who introduced me to Dane after I couldn't find work. My brother only wanted what was best. How could he have known? Fresh tears welled up. I dashed them away, wincing at the throb in my cheekbone. Kira tenderly grasped my hands. We'll get you and the baby to safety, she said softly. My sister and Freystone can shelter you both. I shook my head wildly. He'll find me. He'll. I couldn't finish. Just thinking of Dane's wrath made me shudder. A knock on the door made everyone freeze. Heavy footsteps crossed the porch, then came the splintering of wood. Alara! Dane's roar was pitiless. I leapt up, heart hammering. Like hell, Tobin growled, rolling up his sleeves. He met my terrified eyes. I'll handle this. He pulled open the door before Dane could break it down. My husband towered on the porch, murderous rage twisting his features. That little bitch is my property, he spat at Tobin. She's coming back with me. Tobin didn't flinch. The hell she is. You come near my sister again, I'll make you regret it. Dane drove his fist into Tobin's jaw. My brother reeled but stayed upright, the fists clenched. Fresh panic flooded me. Tobin was brave, but no match for Dane's ruthless strength. I couldn't let anyone else suffer for my sake. I had to protect this newfound glimmer of hope for my baby's future. Steeling myself, I stepped between the two men. Please, Dane, I whispered, despising the trembling in my voice. Don't hurt him. I'll come home with you. Silent tears traced my swelling cheek. Dane grabbed my throat, his lips twisting in a ruthless smile. That's my good, obedient wife, he purred. Over his shoulder, I watched Tobin's face transform with rage and anguish. But I silently pleaded for him not to act, not when it would cost more than I could bear. I let Dane drag me outside, back into the waiting maw of darkness. Everything in me screamed to resist, but my child's safety had to come first. I could only pray my self-sacrifice would buy Tobin and Kira enough time to stop Dane for good. If not, then may God have mercy on me and my baby, because my husband never would. Dane dragged me back into the apartment, his grip like iron on my arm. He shoved me onto the tattered sofa and stood with arms crossed, glaring down at me. My stomach churned with dread. I rested my palms on my swollen belly as if I could shield my child from my husband's ire. Knowing now that his violence could target even an unborn baby made me sick with fear. How long? Dane demanded. I raised my eyes hesitantly. How long? What? His hand cracked across my cheek. I gasped, more startled than pained. How far along is the bastard child you're carrying? My hand flew protectively to my stomach. My son or daughter was no bastard. This baby was all that was pure and good in my wretched life. 6 months, I whispered, dropping my gaze once more. A malevolent smile spread across Dane's face. So you lay with another while swearing to be faithful to me? Never, I cried out. You know this is your child. You know that I have been true. Dane only chuckled darkly. Come now, Alara. Do you really expect me to believe that pathetic whelp Tobin is man enough to give you a baby when I have failed? Shock reverberated through me. Tobin? My brother? Comprehension slammed into my core. Dane had always resented Tobin's easy confidence, his effortless ability to provide for his family despite Dane's superior social standing and wealth. And judging by the lustful glances he had thrown Kira's way at our wedding, Dane had envied them their true and easy intimacy. This was merely another manifestation of Dane's jealousy and spite toward my only real protector, the man I considered my true family. I stood on trembling legs, fists clenched at my sides. Tobin is twice the man you will ever be. I spat with every shred of courage I could muster. I raised my hand and slapped Dane hard across the face. His head jerked sideways. Disbelief flashed in his eyes as his cheek flushed an angry red. I braced myself for his retaliation, but none came. Instead, his lips slowly twisted into a terrifying smile. Well, well. The mouse finally shows her teeth, Dane purred, rubbing his jaw. I was beginning to think you'd lost your fire entirely. He moved towards me with sudden speed, backing me up against the wall. With my swollen belly hindering my escape, I had nowhere to go as Dane placed his palms flat on the faded wallpaper beside my head and leaned in close enough for me to smell the coffee on his breath. Let's make one thing clear, wife, he said, the threat in his voice sending shivers down my spine. You belong to me now and forevermore, and whatever bastard seed festers in your womb means nothing to me. So you play nice, my pet, or you will learn what true suffering is. Days blurred into weeks as I drifted through a haze of fear and despair. Dane's abuse escalated. It was as if my show of defiance had awakened a sleeping beast within him. Bruises flowered on my arms and back from his rough handling. I hid them under long sleeves, not willing to invite more of his twisted accusations. My only joy came from the flutters deep within, as my baby grew healthy and strong, oblivious to the darkness surrounding its arrival. I endured it all in silence, resolute in my vow to protect this innocent life. One night, Dane came home in a drunken rage. I scrambled off the sofa as he stormed through the door and grabbed my arm, his grip crushing. "Worthless bitch!" he roared. "Can't even keep the house clean." He flung me aside and I crashed into the coffee table. Pain exploded through my hip. I curled around my belly, shielding my unborn child from the brunt of the fall. Dane loomed closer, fists clenched. Then came a pounding at the front door. "Alara!" Tobin's voice was a clarion call. My brother threw open the door. Rage etched on his face at the sight of me cringing on the floor. Kira was right behind him. Dane wheeled on them with a guttural snarl. "Get out! She's my property!" Tobin's punch smashed into Dane's jaw. My husband reeled backwards, shock and fury twisting his expression. Tobin grabbed his shirt and slammed him against the wall. "She is my sister!" Each word was punctuated by the impact of Tobin's fist against Dane's face. My brother was slender compared to Dane's bulk, but rage made him formidable. Kira rushed to my side, collapsing beside me. Her hand gently grasped mine. "Alara, we have to go," she pleaded. "Can you stand?" I watched the brawl with detachment, the pain in my hip receding behind the adrenaline flooding my veins. Tobin was buying us time. This was our chance. With Kira's help, I struggled to my feet, one hand supporting my heavy belly. She wrapped her arm around my waist and led me towards sweet freedom, where her car waited by the curb. A roar echoed behind us. I glanced back to see Dane rear up and charge, face twisted in psychotic fury. Before I could scream a warning, he slammed into Tobin's side, driving them both to the floor. "No!" I shrieked. Terror crested and broke as I watched Dane's fists rise and fall, pummeling Tobin where he lay defenseless. Kira and I surged back into the apartment. She grabbed Dane's discarded whiskey bottle and swung with all her might. Glass shattered against his skull and he collapsed sideways with a guttural groan. In the echoing silence, Tobin struggled to rise. Welts and blood masked his gentle features, but his voice was firm as he grasped my shoulder. It's over, Alara. You're safe now. As we left Dane's broken form behind, I knew my brother spoke the truth. We had weathered the darkness and emerged into dawn's hopeful light. The long road to healing stretched before me, but with Tobin and Kira beside me, I feared nothing, not anymore. Kira pressed a mug of steaming tea into my trembling hands. I sat on their sagging sofa, wrapped in a blanket, still struggling to process the night's events. My brother's face was purpled with bruises, but the set of his jaw was resolute. Dane will come after us when he wakes, I whispered. Tobin crouched before me, his blue eyes, so like our father's, gentle but determined. He won't get near you again. I let him fool me once. It won't happen twice. The weight of all they had sacrificed for my sake threatened to crush me. You can't know that, I pleaded. You don't know what he's capable of. Kira squeezed my shoulder. Whatever comes, we'll face together. A pounding on the front door made me jolt, sloshing hot liquid over my shaking hands. Tobin spun, placing himself between me and the sound. Kira's hand slipped into her skirt pocket, fingers wrapping around what I knew to be a compact pistol. The pounding came again, more insistent. Tobin wrenched the door open, muscles coiled to attack, then went rigid with shock. I peered around him to see Dane slumped on the porch, face swollen and stained with blood and dirt. One eye was sealed shut by bruising, and his right arm hung at an odd angle. But somehow he smiled through split and swollen lips when he saw me cringing behind my brother. Alara, he rasped, digging his heels in as if to stand. You're my wife. Tobin shoved him back down with one hand. Like hell she is. How did you find us? Dane coughed, then spit a wad of blood onto the weathered boards. Wasn't hard, he grunted. I'm an old friend of the family, after all. Confusion knifed through me. I clutched Tobin's shoulder with my free hand, my stomach roiling as dread crept up my spine. What is he talking about? Tobin's shoulders curled inward, like a weight was settling over him. He turned and grasped my hands with gentle urgency. Alara, there's something I need to tell you, something I should have told you long ago. He guided me back inside, nodding for Kira to watch Dane. Then he sat me on the sofa and crouched before me again, regret and anguish chasing each other across his face. I've known Dane far longer than you have, little sister. We were childhood friends. Practically brothers. Tobin's voice dropped to a pained whisper. I never dreamed he was capable of such darkness, that he would turn the affection I once felt into this madness. The shattered pieces of my reality cut fresh wounds across my soul. I stared at my brother through a film of tears, my voice barely a tremulous breath. How could you bring this monster into our family? Tobin grasped my hands, his skin rough and so achingly familiar. I swear to you, Alara, I will spend my life making amends. Behind him, Kira stepped onto the porch, pistol raised. My brother's eyes hardened with ruthless purpose. But first, we end this. I winced as Kira examined the dark bruises wringing my throat. Her green eyes blazed with fury, but her voice was gentle. Alara, why protect him? She asked. I turned my face away, ashamed. It had been 1 month since our escape from Dane. 1 month since I had collapsed sobbing in Kira's arms after Tobin revealed their history with my tormentor, the man I had once hoped to call husband. Tobin wanted to end Dane permanently, but I convinced him not to tarnish his soul for my sake. So Dane rotted in prison while we pieced together the fragments of our lives. But yesterday Dane had cornered me on the courthouse steps, public and bold as you please. His parole hearing was scheduled despite my testimony. His eyes promised revenge even as they drank in my face. When his hands closed around my throat, relishing my pulse, none intervened until I sank into darkness. I awoke to Kira tending my injuries, Tobin bellowing at the chief of police. But the strangle marks branding my flesh also marked the imprint of Dane's soul on mine. He thought to reclaim me, and perhaps a dark part of my spirit longed to revisit his particular hell. Kira grasped my shoulders. Dane wants you to protect him. Don't give him that power. I shut my eyes against a rush of anguished tears. In my mind's eye I saw the innocent love shining from Dane's eyes when we wed. I heard the whispered promises that bound my heart to his with silken threads, now thorns embedded there for eternity. Suddenly my grief turned to iron in my chest. What had it gotten me but a succession of bruises, walking on eggshells in my own home, flinching at every loud noise. I would carry Dane's fingerprints for life, etched onto my very soul. No more. I dashed the tears away and straightened my spine. Kira watched wariness dawn into pride as she recognized the birth of her ally. Dane took everything from me, I said quietly. Even now he thinks I'm his possession, but no longer. At Tobin's protest, I slipped from the shelter of their apartment the next dawn. I knew where Dane breakfasted those early mornings, where the demons inside him drowned their thirst, if only briefly. I felt his eyes on me the moment I entered, heard his smug greeting as I slid behind his chair in the shadowed corner, felt his shock as I pressed cold metal to his throat and whispered, "This is for every bruise I ever hid, for every night you threatened the life inside me." His sudden pallor was gratifying, the pleading in his eyes even more so. Let him experience one fraction of the powerlessness he inflicted on me for years. "You created a monster," I murmured. "I'll see you buried and cold before I let you crawl back into my thoughts." When I walked back into the dawning light alone, Tobin saw the transformation in my face. His shoulders straightened as he realized the fight flowing bright and fierce in my veins. We would see this through, brother and sister, bound by blood and scars. No ghost would haunt me ever again. I straightened my skirt with sweat-slicked palms, struggling to still the tremors in my hands. The courthouse loomed before me, a monument to justice, about to be served. Tobin gave my fingers a gentle, bracing squeeze. "Are you ready for this?" he asked solemnly. At my terse nod, he pushed open the heavy doors. The cavernous courtroom vibrated with anticipation. I kept my chin high, ignoring the whispers that followed us down the aisle. In my arms, I cradled my infant son, swaddled tightly against my chest. His tiny body anchored me as we took our place behind the prosecutor. The judge entered, black robes swirling. The room rose respectfully. As we sat, the doors behind the bench flew open. 2 officers led Dane in handcuffs to the defendant's table. His glare seared me the moment he entered. I forced myself to meet it steadily, cradling my son closer. Dane's eyes dropped to the bundle in my arms, upper lip curling in a sneer. Then he turned away, leaning casually back in his chair to survey the audience with an air of bored indifference. My testimony was brutal in its honesty. I recounted every horror of our marriage in vivid detail, the manipulation that lured me in, each humiliating abuse, his vow to make my child suffer for my imagined sins. "He is a monster," I finished quietly, "one who hides behind a mask of civility and charm, but beneath lies the heart of a soulless coward." Dane merely examined his nails, but the tightening of his jaw revealed my words had hit their mark. Exhibit by exhibit, we built the irrefutable case against my husband. Hospital records showed old injuries consistent with abuse. Witnesses attested to seeing Dane attack me in public. The gun Kira had used to subdue him during my escape bore only Tobin's clean prints. Dane's confident expression slowly shifted to incredulity, then fury as his web of lies collapsed around him. At the first crack in his superior mask, vindication roared within me. I watched, spine ruler straight, as he took the stand in his own reckless defense. Dane painted himself the long-suffering husband to an unfaithful wife. His son was no child of his, he claimed. My infidelity had invited punishment. Lies! The word ripped from my throat before Tobin could restrain me. Every eye turned my way, but I only had eyes for Dane as I gently handed my son to Kira. Then I stalked forward, my entire body shaking with outrage accumulated from years of silence. "You dare stand there and besmirch what you have brutalized?" My voice echoed off the arched ceilings. "The only falsehoods spoken here are falling from your forked tongue." I spun to appeal to the stony-faced jurors. What is the word of a pregnant woman, one who has only shown compassion her entire life, against that of a proven violent offender, of a man whose charm and standing make his threat all the more sinister? My words dropped into absolute silence, but for my son's soft gurgle. I walked back to Kira, gentling my tone as I lifted the baby to my cheek. "The only innocence in this room lies in my arms, gentlemen. I implore you, do not let it be corrupted by the poison of this serpent." The foreman's eyes shone bright. Behind him, Dane sank into his seat, recognition of his defeat breaking across his face at last. I blinked against the brilliant sunlight, pausing at the foot of the courthouse steps. Tobin and Kira flanked me like patient sentinels while I adjusted the strap of the baby carrier across my chest. My son burbled happily, his tiny hand curled around my finger. The click of a lighter made me glance over. Across the street, half hidden by a copse of trees, Dane lifted the dancing flame to the cigarette between his lips. His eyes locked with mine over the sparking light, flat and cold in his expressionless face. He took a long, slow drag, wreathed by tendrils of smoke that faded on the breeze between us. There was no menace in that penetrating stare today, only grudging acceptance that his empire of lies had fallen at last. I gazed back levelly, seeing the man before me with new clarity. Just a sad, bitter soul who knew no other way to live except by extinguishing the light of others. Well, no longer. The small flame of innocence in my arms would grow into a bonfire of joy and self-worth that no one could ever dampen. I would make certain of it. I blinked, and Dane was gone, leaving only the lingering, acrid scent of tobacco hanging beneath the trees. Tobin's hand gripped my shoulder. "It's time to put the ghost to rest, Alara," he said gently. His eyes sought mine, bright with purpose. "I think it's time we went home." I let the words settle comfortingly around my heart as Tobin led us to the car where Kira waited. Home. A safe harbor I had not known in years, save for the shelter of my guardians through the storm. But as we navigated out of the bustling city into gentle hills mantled in emerald, my breath caught at the sight of home emerging through the dappled light. The cottage was just as I remembered, whitewashed walls festooned with vines and brilliant flowers, wide windows welcoming golden sunlight to kiss the polished wood floors within. It was the only real home I had known since our parents' deaths. Tobin had given up the property to follow his career in the city, had built his new life tethered in chains to Dane without even knowing. Now we had come full circle to mend and forge fresh bonds on beloved soil. I crossed the threshold into crisp, sweet air, redolent of fresh bread and dried lavender. Vases overflowed with flowers from Tobin and Kira's garden. I stroked their velvety petals, overwhelmed with gratitude for their silent reassurance that beauty could bloom in even the most scorched earth. My son's new nursery shone with honeyed light, awaiting us to build new memories within its walls. And through the windows I could glimpse the sun-drenched hill where Mama, Papa, and I once picnicked among the riotous wildflowers. Where Papa had held my tiny hands as I took my first graceful steps into the world. I would walk there with my son when he was old enough, would cradle Papa's gentle wisdom and Mama's courage imprinted on my heart to share with my beautiful boy. He would never walk alone. I would battle any monster plaguing his little mind or darkening the horizon before I allowed it to haunt him, as I had been haunted. As I stood watching my son sleep, his tiny chest rising and falling in blissful peace, Tobin appeared silently beside me. Without turning, I slipped my hand into his larger one with a contented sigh. The ghosts were fading now with the breaking dawn, stripped of their power at last. My battle was won. But the war wages on, as long as light remains to fight the encroaching dark. I rested my head on Tobin's shoulder, floating on a sea of calm I had never expected to feel again. But with family surrounding me and nourishing the seeds of myself I had feared lost forever, I could weather any storm yet to come. My second chance, our second chance together, had only just begun. The searing pain hit me like a bolt of lightning, radiating from my core through every nerve ending in my body. I cried out, gripping the bed rails until my knuckles turned white. The contractions were coming faster now, intense waves slamming into me. "You're doing great. Just keep breathing," the nurse encouraged. I tried to focus on her calming voice, using it as an anchor against the agony. After what felt like an eternity, I heard the sharp cries of a newborn pierce the air. "It's a girl," the doctor proclaimed. Relief and joy flooded through me as they placed my precious baby girl into my arms. Her tiny fingers grasped at mine as I held her close. In that moment, all the pain dissolved away. I looked up to see Nolan, my husband of 5 years, staring down at us. But instead of the loving gaze I expected, his face was etched with tension. His eyes flickered with an emotion I couldn't quite place. "She's perfect," I whispered, tears of happiness trailing down my cheeks. Nolan gave a curt nod. "Get some rest. I need to make a call," he said abruptly before slipping out of the room. A gnawing feeling began to take hold in my gut. Something wasn't right. Ever since I had gotten pregnant, Nolan had grown increasingly distant and cold. It was a stark contrast to the man I fell in love with, who had once been my biggest supporter. I tried to push away the dark thoughts creeping in. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life. Nolan returned half an hour later, his jaw clenched. I searched his face, looking for any trace of joy or excitement, but found none. "Who was on the phone?" I asked. He avoided my gaze. "No one. Look, we need to talk." I noticed he was still wearing his wedding ring, the plain gold band I had placed on his finger 5 years ago, the one he promised he would never take off. But now it seemed like a lie. "What's going on?" I demanded, my voice shaking. Nolan stood rigidly at the foot of the bed, his eyes cold. "This isn't working. I've tried, but I can't do this anymore." His words dropped like stones in the pit of my stomach. "Do what exactly?" "This." He made a gesture with his hand. "I'm in love with someone else." The room started spinning. This had to be a nightmare. "What are you saying?" I whispered. He shoved his hands in his pockets. "Her name is Cassidy. We've been seeing each other for months. I'm going to be with her." Suddenly, the past year replayed in my mind on fast forward. Nolan's unexplained absences, his emotional distance, it all clicked into place. Rage boiled up inside me. "You cheated on me while I was pregnant with your child." He stood there, stone-faced. "Cassidy was there for me in ways you weren't." The audacity of his words stole the breath from my lungs. I glared at him with every ounce of loathing I could muster. "Get out," I seethed. "Get out before I call security to drag you out of here." For a moment, Nolan just stared at me. Then, without another word, he turned and left, the door clicking shut behind him with dreadful finality. I looked down at my innocent baby, still cradled protectively in my arms. Nolan had turned his back on us, but I would never abandon my child. A steely resolve rose up within me, cutting through the shock and anguish. If Nolan wanted a war, he would get one. I would make him regret the day he ever betrayed us. The next few days passed in a haze of feedings, diaper changes, and sporadic bursts of sleep. My thoughts constantly drifted back to Nolan's cruel revelation in the hospital room. I replayed the scene over and over, analyzing every detail. The cold detachment in his eyes, the matter-of-fact tone as he declared his love for another woman. My best friend Juliana came to visit often, helping around the house and providing a sympathetic ear. I found myself obsessively recounting Nolan's betrayal to her, as if speaking the words aloud might miraculously change them. "That bastard! I never trusted him," Juliana declared, her eyes flashing. "Don't waste another second worrying about that snake." I sighed, adjusting the swaddled newborn in my arms. "I just don't understand how he could do this. We were so happy once." Juliana shook her head. "People show their true colors eventually. He never deserved you." I thought back to the early days with Nolan, how he used to surprise me with flowers, how we would stay up all night talking. When had it all gone wrong? "I ignored so many red flags," I said quietly. "The late nights at the office, the locked phone screen. I feel so stupid." "This is not your fault." Juliana squeezed my shoulder. "Nolan chose to betray his vows. Don't let him make you feel guilty, too." Over the next few weeks, I tried to focus on healing both physically and emotionally. But lingering doubts continued to plague me. I needed proof of Nolan's affair, some tangible confirmation that this Cassidy person truly existed. One evening, Juliana arrived on my doorstep, eyes blazing with fury. That asshole thought he could keep his little secret contained at the office. Well, it's all out in the open now. She revealed that she had discreetly investigated at the company where Nolan and I both worked. Rumors of his affair with a younger colleague named Cassidy had spread like wildfire. "It's definitely the same woman he mentioned," I said bitterly. "He wasn't even trying to hide it from people at work." Juliana nodded. "I'm so sorry, Alara, but at least now you know the truth. He doesn't deserve your tears." Hot anger pulsed through me as reality sank in. Nolan had paraded his mistress around, utterly unconcerned about my pain or public humiliation. I pictured his smug face and felt pure loathing wash over me. He had slipped the knife in my back when I was at my most vulnerable. Well, it was time I returned the favor. A week later, I was finally discharged from the hospital with strict instructions to rest and recover. As I settled into my bedroom, a sense of peace washed over me. For the first time since that wretched day, Nolan destroyed our lives. I had just finished nursing the baby when the doorbell rang. Still sore and fatigued, I slowly made my way downstairs. I froze when I opened the front door. Nolan stood on the porch next to a slender blonde woman I could only assume was Cassidy. Before I could react, they brushed past me into the foyer. "What the hell are you doing here?" I demanded, blocking their path. Nolan glanced around impatiently. "I'm here for my things. Cassidy will help me pack up." I gaped at them. Did they think they could just barge in and take over? Cassidy gave me a disparaging look. "We're here to take the baby too. She deserves a proper home." Rage surged within me. "You must be out of your damn minds if you think I'm letting her go anywhere with you," I spat. Nolan stepped forward menacingly. "I will be a part of my daughter's life, like it or not." "Over my dead body," I snarled. "Get out before I call the cops." Just then I heard the front door swing open again behind me. "I wouldn't unpack just yet if I were you," came Juliana's voice. I turned to see her waving a manila envelope, eyes flashing. Nolan paled at the sight of her. "In fact, I think you'll both be cleaning out your desks at the office instead," she continued. Cassidy let out a scoff. "And who the hell are you?" "Who I am doesn't matter. What matters is that I have enough evidence here of your sordid affair to bury you both." Juliana pulled out printed emails and photographed text conversations documenting their relationship, all time-stamped during my pregnancy. Nolan lunged for the papers, but Juliana yanked them away. "Ah, too late. Copies have already been sent to the head office. Hope you don't mind facing a sexual harassment investigation, Cassidy." Cassidy gasped, glanced frantically at Nolan, then fled for the still-open door. After a final venomous glare, Nolan followed close behind. I turned to Juliana, awestruck. "How did you get all that?" she winked. "I have my sources. No one messes with my best friend." Relief swept over me. Once again, Juliana had proven herself a loyal ally. While Nolan and his mistress reaped the bitter harvest of their lies, I would keep forging ahead. Upstairs, my innocent baby slept soundly, unaware of the darkness that had invaded our lives. Gazing at her sweet face, I knew I would move mountains to make sure she never suffered like I had. Nolan had slipped the knife in my back when I was vulnerable. Now it was my turn to take everything from him. His dignity, his career, his reputation. The only thought sweeter than revenge was the chance to start over, far from his shadow. The next morning, I received an urgent call from Juliana, instructing me to get to the office immediately. Still weak and sore, I reluctantly left my newborn with a neighbor and drove downtown. Juliana met me outside the towering glass building that housed our company's headquarters. "I hope you're ready for a show," she said with a sly grin. Up in the executive wing, we stepped into a posh waiting area outside the president's office. Cassidy was already there, pacing and biting her nails. When she saw me, her eyes flashed with hatred. At that moment, the office door swung open and Nolan stalked out, face pale. He froze when he saw us, fear creeping into his expression. Mr. Harlan, the company president, emerged behind Nolan and beckoned us all inside. "Please, have a seat," Harlan said politely as we filed in. He was known as much for his courtesy as his shrewd intelligence. Cassidy sat ramrod straight, eyes fixed on the floor. Nolan drummed his fingers anxiously on the armrest beside her. Harlan neatly arranged papers on his desk before folding his hands. "It seems we have some personnel issues that require immediate attention." He turned to Cassidy first. "You are aware that intimate relationships between employees are against company policy?" "Yes, sir," she answered tersely. "And yet clear evidence shows you had an ongoing affair with a married executive, a man whose wife, I might add, you worked closely with during her difficult pregnancy." Cassidy flushed but said nothing. Harlan continued in measured tones. "Your actions show a disturbing lack of integrity and professionalism. Effective today, your employment is terminated." Cassidy shot to her feet. "You can't do this. My family donated half the artwork in this building." Harlan didn't blink. "Your aunt may be a noted philanthropist, but neither she nor your family name will excuse misconduct here." Defeated, Cassidy grabbed her purse and fled the office. Nolan reached out as if to stop her, then seemed to think better of it. Harlan turned his attention next to Nolan. "Not only did you violate company rules, you abandoned your family duties. Such poor character does not befit a senior executive." Nolan's face twisted. "I've given 15 years to this firm. You can't throw me out over one mistake." "It was no mere mistake. You systematically deceived your wife and jeopardized an important project, distracting your team for months. Your presence here is now untenable." Harlan slid an envelope across the desk. Here is the terms of your severance package. I suggest you accept and make a quiet departure. With shaking hands, Nolan took the papers and left. I watched him go with a sense of dark satisfaction. Harlan gave me a kind look. My dear, you were clearly the injured party here. Consider this matter closed on the company's end. I hope you recover fully, both physically and personally. Outside the office, Juliana hugged me tight. I let out a sob I didn't know I'd been holding in, the overwhelming emotions of the past weeks finally crashing over me. It was over. Justice had been swift and sure. Now I could focus on rebuilding a new life with my daughter, a peaceful life, far from the backstabbing duplicity of people like Nolan. When karma came for him, the knife in his back was one he richly deserved. In the weeks following Nolan's termination, I focused on regaining my strength and finding a new normal with my daughter. I took extended medical leave from work, relying on my savings while I figured out next steps. Juliana was a constant support, helping around the house and encouraging me to take it one day at a time. Forget about Nolan. Everything will work out, you'll see, she said during one late-night chat session. But I couldn't forget. Or forgive. Quiet rage still simmered within me over how Nolan deceived me. I replayed every memory, analyzing all the times he lied straight to my face. He had hurt me deeper than anyone ever had, and he deserved to fully reap what he sowed. Late one night, an idea began to take form. If Nolan thought he could simply walk away unscathed, he was dead wrong. With Juliana's help, I would make sure his betrayal followed him like a dark cloud over every aspect of his life. I decided to start with his beloved career reputation. Nolan had always taken pride in being a rising star at the company, ruthless and ambitious. It was time to crash his image and turn his coworkers against him. Juliana and I drafted an anonymous email detailing Nolan's affair with a direct report during my vulnerable pregnancy. We included key dates and events, along with Cassidy's name. From an internet cafe, we sent the message to everyone in their business circle. Soon after, the heated office gossip mill went into overdrive. Nolan's peers and colleagues were appalled at the sordid details. The portrait of a lying snake emerged, destroying any respect he once commanded. Meanwhile, I spoke with a take-no-prisoners divorce lawyer about destroying Nolan financially. We drew up divorce papers asserting adultery as grounds and seeking full custody with a generous side of child support. Serving Nolan the papers at his new apartment was profoundly satisfying. The look of defeat on his face was priceless. "You'll regret this," he snarled, but we both knew all the power rested firmly in my hands now. Getting my revenge on the home-wrecking Cassidy required a subtler approach. I unearthed her active social media accounts and anonymously sent screenshots to her college friends of her boasting about seducing a married man. The backlash was swift and severe. Calls for her to be fired from her new waitressing job flooded her online profiles. Old friends and roommates publicly denounced her character. She disappeared from social media entirely less than 24 hours later. While Cassidy retreated into obscurity, Nolan would soon endure the full public humiliation of a court battle dragging his name through the mud. I hoped the legal fees and child support bled him dry. As I rocked my baby to sleep each night, the dark thoughts receded and calm took its place. The storm Nolan brought into our lives had cleared. Soon we would be free of him for good. The memories of the loving man I once knew replaced by the far more accurate image of a spineless, cruel traitor. He was finally getting exactly what he deserved. The day of my first divorce hearing arrived gray and bleak, fittingly mirroring my mood. I dressed in sober black and steeled myself for the confrontation ahead. I strode into the courtroom with my head held high, refusing to show an ounce of weakness. Nolan sat at the defendant's table, looking pale and twitchy. His usual well-groomed appearance was notably absent. As we went through initial motions, Nolan tried repeatedly to catch my eye. I kept my gaze fixed straight ahead, acting as if he weren't even in the room. When the judge questioned Nolan about the affair accusations, he sputtered unconvincingly. It meant nothing, just a stupid mistake. My lawyer presented ironclad evidence of the timeline of his betrayal coinciding with my vulnerable pregnancy. Nolan had no counter-argument. On the custody issues, Nolan became agitated and confrontational. "You can't prove I wouldn't be a fit parent," he burst out. The judge's tone grew stern. "You have not participated in caring for your newborn child. These allegations against your character are troubling." In the end, the judge approved our proposed arrangements for full custody and a substantial monthly child support payment. Nolan had lost completely on all fronts. The burning fury in his eyes spoke volumes. As we left court, Nolan grabbed my arm and forced me to face him. "I won't let you take my daughter away from me," he hissed. I yanked my arm back. "Touch me again and I'll have my lawyer file for a restraining order." Leaving him fuming, I walked away feeling victorious. The law was firmly on my side. Over the next few weeks, Nolan maintained a campaign to salvage his reputation without success. He tried shifting blame, claiming I pushed him away during pregnancy and refused marital affection. But the facts of his prolonged deceit were indisputable. Former colleagues and business contacts continued to ice him out, disgusted by the very public details of his affairs and misconduct. Doors closed swiftly when he came calling for job prospects. Nolan grew increasingly unhinged, ranting on social media about injustice and karma coming for those who wronged him. But his credibility was shot. Few paid him any mind. Meanwhile, I embraced single motherhood with a new optimism. The final divorce decree arrived right before my daughter's first birthday, with all terms in my favor. The new year felt full of promise and possibility. On a whim, I reached out to my former workplace and discovered they had an opening, eager to have me return. The chance to fully rebuild my career after years on the mommy track felt like a hard-won victory. As I regained my financial independence and stability, I marveled at how far I'd come. Just a year ago, my world had come crashing down. Now the future looked bright through eyes unclouded by lies and betrayal. Nolan had gotten the bitter revenge he deserved, and I had reclaimed my life. Over the next year, I fell into a rhythm of balancing work and motherhood. My new role involved less travel, allowing me to better care for my daughter's needs. Having the flexibility to leave early for school pickups and doctor visits made all the difference. Settling into my own place also brought immense relief. The wounds of Nolan's betrayal no longer haunted every corner. This was a home filled with new memories and possibilities. My social life also revived as I reconnected with old friends. Juliana remained a stalwart support, helping wrangle my rambunctious toddler during girls' nights out. Her companionship brought much-needed fun and laughter into my days. Meanwhile, Nolan's circumstances continued to crumble. With his reputation in tatters, he could only find spotty contract work. He burned through his remaining savings trying to keep up appearances and pay owed debts. I heard through the grapevine that he was hitting the bottle pretty hard too, often drunk and belligerent in public. It seemed anyone still willing to associate with him was another cheating lowlife or enabler. On the rare occasions our paths crossed, Nolan's bloodshot eyes and disheveled appearance only emphasized how far he'd fallen. He was a shell of the polished, ruthless corporate climber I'd once known. "We could have had it all," he slurred to me on one awkward chance encounter outside my office building. "It wasn't meant to turn out like this." I sidestepped him with a shrug. Should have thought of that sooner. I had long since stopped caring about anything he had to say. After 2 years of sporadic calls and texts full of bitter recriminations, Nolan's contact gradually faded to nothing. The biggest surprise was realizing I didn't miss him in the slightest. I was finally free, fully healed from wounds that had once cut so deep. My daughter remained oblivious to her father's dysfunctional spiral into obscurity. To her, family meant me, Grandma, and Aunt Juliana. She was thriving in preschool and had playdates most weekends with classmates. I made sure her life was filled with love and joy. As for Cassidy, the homewrecker who helped implode my marriage, karma had left its mark on her too. Crippled by the scandal and social media backlash, she had changed her name and left the state. Wherever she ended up, I hope guilt haunts her over what she helped destroy. Maybe Nolan can give her late-night calls instead. On the eve of my daughter's 4th birthday, I hosted a princess tea party with 10 giggling little girls crowding my living room. As I snapped photos and filled teacups, my heart swelled with love and pride. The painful past felt like a distant lifetime ago. Now my days were rich with playfulness and possibility, chasing around a bright-eyed daughter who was the center of my world. I had traveled through the darkness and come out wiser, stronger, renewed in body and spirit. The future awaited, more radiant than ever. Time marched steadily onward, each new day further distance between my present happiness and the pain of the past. My daughter thrived in elementary school, smart and social. She excelled in reading and loved showing off new dance moves she learned in hip-hop class. Her eyes, so like her father's, now sparkled with joy he had long forfeited the right to witness. At my company, years of consistently superb work paid off with a promotion to a director-level position. I now led a team of bright up-and-comers helping set strategy for our division. It felt surreal to be so highly valued when just a few years prior I'd wondered if my career would fully recover post-divorce. On evenings when my schedule allowed, Juliana and I would meet up for dinner and dissect dating app horror stories. We made an unlikely pair, her flashy and fiery, me understated and dry-humored. But our sisterly bond ran deep. "You really showed that cheating scumbag Nolan what's what," Juliana remarked one night as we lingered over tiramisu. "Not every woman could turn heartbreak into such epic revenge." I smiled wryly. "Don't think I didn't imagine slipping arsenic in his wine a few times. But in the end, living well turned out to be the best revenge." One spring morning I spotted a familiar name in the newspaper and my heartbeat quickened reflexively before I could stop it. There was Nolan, looking worn and shabby as he exited a courthouse trying unsuccessfully to dodge photographers. The accompanying article chronicled his guilty plea to drunk driving charges after ramming his car into a tree. His license suspended, career in tatters. The shell of the man I once loved now seemed utterly broken. For the first time in ages, an unexpected pang of sympathy pierced my heart. Whatever latent feelings stirred were quickly extinguished when Nolan's name surfaced again the following week. Arrested on assault charges after a bar fight, his spiral into reckless self-destruction seemed complete. I shook my head, sadly but resolutely. Some people could not be saved from themselves. I had to remain focused on protecting the family we had built, me and our daughter. She was the only part of him worth cherishing. As I helped my little girl practice newly learned multiplication tables that evening, I marveled at how innocence persists even when surrounded by the fallen world. Her childhood was so different from my own, devoid of yelling, mind games, and violence. By some miracle I had overcome my beginnings and broken the cycle. My daughter would grow up trusting in steadfast love, not tiptoeing around landmines. I realized then that I bore no lingering resentments over the pain and deception in my past. Survival and renewal had given me the courage to fully embrace life's complexities. On the other side awaited joy and light, if you just kept moving forward. Nolan's wasted potential was not my concern. His choices led him down a destructive road long before our paths fatefully intertwined. I saw that now with clarity. My task was to raise my daughter with wisdom and compassion, equipping her for whatever lay ahead. As for me, the possibilities of the future beckoned brightly once more. Scars healed and lessons learned, I stepped forward to greet them.